My father would have used a regulator to slow the growth, a defoliant to kill the leaves. That's what he knew. That's how it was done. You do things different, people don't like it much. You have to prove yourself to them. You have to want to. He straightened and met her eyes. How much do I have to prove to you, Tori? I don't know what you mean. The way I figure, most people treated you a certain way. That's what you knew. That's how it was done. I'd say I've done things different. You're angry with me. Oh, yeah, I'm angry with you. We'll get to that. But right now I'm asking what you want from me, just exactly what you want. I don't want anything, Cade. God damn it, that's the wrong answer. When he strode away, she hurried after him. Why is it wrong? Why should I have to want things from you or want you to be something, do something, when I've been happier with you just as you are than I've ever been? He stopped and turned back to her. The sun beat mercilessly down on the fields. He felt the heat roll over him, roll inside him. That's a first, you telling me I make you happy. But I'll tell you what's wrong with it. I want things from you, and it's not going to work between us if it's all one-sided. Neither one of us is going to stay happy for long that way. The ache punched into her stomach and up toward her heart. You want to end it. I don't... Her breath caught, breaking her voice. Tears swam into her eyes and burned there. You can't... Fumbling for words, she backed away. I'm sorry. You should be for thinking that. He didn't fuss with her tears, but narrowed his own eyes, calculated. I told you I love you. Do you think I can just switch that off because you're a lot of work? I brought you here to show you I finish what I start, that what belongs to me gets everything I've got. You belong to me. He gripped her arms, brought her up to her toes. I'm getting tired of waiting for you to figure that out. I care for what's mine, Tori, but I expect something back. I told you I love you. Give me something back. I'm afraid of what I feel for you. Can you understand? I might if you tell me what you feel for me. Too much. She shut her eyes. So much I can't imagine my life without you in it. I don't want to need you. And of course it's easy for everyone else to need, for me to need you. He gave her a little shake that had her eyes snapping open. I love you, Victoria, and it's given me some very bad moments. He pressed his lips to her brow. I wouldn't change it even if I could. I want to be calm about it. She laid her cheek against his chest, smiling a little when he pulled the sunglasses free and tossed them on the ground. I just want to be normal about it. Why would you think it's normal to be calm about love? I don't feel calm. He stroked a hand down her hair. Do you love me, Tori? She tightened her grip, anchoring herself. Yes, I think, just yes. He tugged her hair until her face lifted. Let's leave it at yes, he murmured, and covered her mouth with his. Say it a few times so we both get used to it. Do you love me? Yes. She let out a shaky breath, wrapped her arms around his neck. Better already. Do you love me, Tori? This time she laughed. Yes. Nearly perfect. He rubbed his lips over hers, felt hers soften. Will you marry me, Tori? Yes. Her eyes fluttered open. She jerked back. What? I'll take the first response. He swung her off her feet, kept her mouth busy with his until she was breathless and dizzy. No, put me down. Let me think. Sorry, I'm afraid you leaked before you looked. Now you have to live with it. You know very well that was a trick. A maneuver, he corrected as he carried her back toward the car, and a damn good one if I do say so myself. Cade, marriage is nothing to joke about, and it's something I haven't begun to think of. You'll have to think fast, then. If you want a big wedding, we can wait till fall, after harvest. He dropped her into the car. But if you'd like small and intimate, my preference next weekend suits me. Stop it. Just stop. I haven't agreed to marriage. Yes, you did. He hopped in beside her. You can backtrack, bluster, circle around, but the fact is I love you. You love me. Marriage is where we're heading. That's the kind of people we are, Tori. I want a life with you. I want a family with you. Family. The thought of it ran cold in her blood. Don't you see that's why... Oh, God, Cade. He took her face in his hands. Our family, Tori, the one we'll make together, will be ours. You know nothing's that simple. There's nothing simple about it. Right doesn't always mean simple. This isn't the time, Cade. There's too much happening around us. That's why it's the perfect time. We'll talk rationally about this, she told him when he drove down the dirt road, when my head's not spinning. Fine, we'll talk all you want. When the work road split, he took the left fork. Instantly, Tori shot up in the seat, her stomach pitching. Where are you going? Beau Rev, there's something I need to get. I'm not going there. I can't go there. Of course you can. He laid a hand on hers. It's a house, Tori, just a house. And it's mine. Her chest hurt and her palms went damp. I'm not ready, and your mother won't like it. It's your mother's home, Cade. It's my home, he corrected coolly, and it'll be our home. My mother will have to deal with that. And so, he thought, would Tori. 26. It was, Tori thought, the most wonderful house. Not grand and elegant like the lovely old homes in Charleston with their fluidity and feminine grace, but vibrant and unique and powerful. As a child, she'd thought of it as a castle, a place of dreams and beauty and great strength. On the few occasions she had dared to step inside, she had gawked and spoken in whispers, like a pagan entering a cathedral. She had gone in rarely, too shy and afraid to risk the tight-lipped disapproval of Margaret Lavelle, and as yet too young to protect herself against the sharp arrows of Margaret's thoughts. But she had seen and smelled and touched every room through hope. She knew the view out of each window, the feel of the tile and wood floors. Under her feet she smelled the scent that hung in the tower office, the mix of leather and bourbon and tobacco that meant man. Papa. She couldn't allow herself to see it through Hope's eyes now, to be drawn to it, into it, that way. She had to see it through her own, through the now. It was as stunning as it had been the first time she'd seen it, she realized, stunning and proud against the sky with towers defiantly rising. Beau Rev. Yes, it was exactly that, beautiful dreams with flowers spread at its feet like an offering and grand old trees guarding its flanks. For a few precious moments, Tori forgot that the last time she'd seen it, she'd limped up the lane with horror in her eyes and death in her heart. It doesn't change, she murmured. No matter what goes on around it, even inside it, it stays. There's wonder in that. It meant something to him to hear the pleasure in her voice when she spoke of his home. My ancestors had ego and humor. Both are strong traits for building. He stopped the car, turned off the engine. Come inside, Victoria. Her smile, one she hadn't known, curved her lips, vanished. You're asking for trouble. He got out of the car, walked around to her door, and opened it. I'm asking the woman I love into my home. He took her hand and drew her out. She was reminded that however genteel he might be, he was equally stubborn. If there's trouble, we'll deal with it. It's easier for you. You stand on a foundation like the house. I've always teetered on boggy ground, so I have to watch my step. She looked up at him. Is it so important to you that I take this one? Yes, it is. Well, remember that if I end up sinking. They walked up the steps onto the veranda. She remembered sitting there with Hope, playing jacks or studying one of their pirate maps. Long, tall glasses of lemonade beaded with damp, frosted cookies, the scent of roses and lavender. The image of it slipped in and out of her mind. Two young girls, arms and legs browned from the sun, their heads bent close, whispering secrets, though there was no one to hear. Adventure, Tori said quietly. That was our password. We were going to have so many adventures. Now we will. He lifted her hand to kiss it. She'd like that, wouldn't she? Yes, I suppose she would, though she didn't care much for boys. Tori managed to smile as he opened the door. You're so tedious and silly. Her heart beat too fast, and the grand foyer with its lovely green tiles stretched in front of her like a pit. Cade, trust me, he said, and drew her inside. The air was cool. It was always cool and fresh and fragrant. She remembered the magic of that, of how sharply it contrasted with the stuffy heat of her house, how the smells of last night's dinner never smeared the air here. And she remembered standing there with Cade before, nearly there. You were tall for a boy. She fought to keep her voice steady. It seemed to me you were tall, and so pretty, the prince of the castle. You still are. So little has changed here. Tradition is a religion to the Lavelles. We're schooled in it from birth. It's both comfort and trap. Come into the parlor. I'll get you something cool to drink. She wasn't allowed in the parlor. Nearly said so before she caught herself. She could sit in the kitchen if she went in the back. Lila would give her iced tea or Coca-Cola, a cookie, or some small treat. And if she helped with the sweeping, a quarter to tuck in her mason jar under the bed. But she wasn't allowed in the family rooms. With an effort, she blocked out the old images that wanted to intrude and concentrated on the now. The early lilies were in bloom, and there was a vase bright with them on a gorgeous table spread beneath the curve of the stairs. The scent of them was utterly female. Beside them were tall white tapers in bold blue stands. No one had lighted them, so they stood pure, untouched, and perfect. Like a photograph, she thought. Every piece, every placement, absolute as if it had remained just exactly so for decades. And now she was walking into the picture. Even as she stepped toward the doorway, Margaret appeared at the top of the sweep of the stairs. "Kincaid?" Her voice was sharp, stinging. Her hand wanted to tremble as it held the banister, but she wouldn't permit it. Head lifted, she came halfway down. "I would like to speak with you." "Of course." He knew the tone, the stance, and didn't bother to mask his response with a polite smile. "I'm about to show Tori into the parlor. Why don't you join us?" "I prefer to speak with you privately. Please come upstairs." She started to turn, assured he would follow. "I'm afraid that'll have to wait," he said pleasantly. "I have a guest." She jerked to a halt, her head whipping around just as Cade led Tori into the parlor. "Cade, don't do this." Already the tension, the stabs of animosity were pricking her. "There's no point." "There's an essential point. What would you like? I'm sure Lila has iced tea in the kitchen, or there's sparkling water behind the bar." "I don't need anything. Don't use me as a weapon. It's not fair." "Darling," he bent down to kiss her forehead. "I'm not." "How dare you?" Margaret stood in the doorway, her face pale and set, her eyes swirling with temper. "How dare you defy me in this way, and with this woman? I made my wishes perfectly clear. I will not have her in this house." "Perhaps I didn't make my wishes perfectly clear." Cade shifted, laid his hand on Tori's shoulder. "Tori is with me, and welcome here, and I expect anyone I bring into my home to be treated with courtesy. Since you insist on having this conversation with her present, I see no reason to bother with a pretense of courtesy or manners." The picture changed again as Margaret entered. The stage, Tori thought, was perfectly dressed. Only the characters revolved. "You are free to sleep with whomever you choose. I can't stop you from spending your time with that woman or generating gossip about yourself and this family, but you will not bring your slut under my roof." "Be careful, Mother." Cade's voice had gone soft, dangerously soft. "You're speaking about the woman I'm going to marry." As if he'd struck her, Margaret took a staggering step back. Color flooded her face now, staining her cheeks. "Have you lost your mind?" Where are my lines, Tori wondered. Surely I must have some in this odd little play. Why can't I remember them? "I'm not asking you to approve. While I regret this upsets you, you'll have to adjust." "Cade," Tori found her voice already rusty with disuse, "I'm sure your mother would prefer to speak to you in private." "Don't put words in my mouth," Margaret snapped at her. "I see I might have waited too long. If you persist on this path with this woman, you risk Beau Rev. I'll use my influence to persuade the Board of Lavelle Cotton to remove you as chairman." "You can try," he said equably. "You won't succeed. I'll fight you every step of the way, and I have the advantage. And even if you could undermine my position at the plant, which I doubt, you'll never touch the farm." "This is your gratitude. It's her doing." Margaret's heels clicked on the hardwood as she rushed forward. Cade merely stepped to the side, putting himself between Tori and his mother. "No, it's my doing. Deal with me." "Oh, good, a party." With Bea racing at her heels, Faith strolled in. Her eyes were bright with anticipation, her smile wicked. "Hello, Tori, don't you look pretty? How about some wine?" "That's an excellent idea, Faith. Pour Tori some wine." "Deal with me," he repeated to Margaret. "You're disgracing your family and your sister's memory." "No, but you are. It's a disgrace to blame one child for the death of another. A disgrace to treat a blameless woman with such contempt and viciousness out of your own guilt and grief. I'm sorry you could never see beyond them to the children you had left, to the life you might have made outside of that bubble you surrounded yourself with." "You would speak to me this way?" "I've tried every other way. If you did what you had to do for yourself, I won't blame you for it. If you continue to live as you have these last 18 years, it's your choice. But Faith and I have lives of our own, and mine is going to be with Tori." "Well, congratulations." Faith lifted the glass of wine she'd just poured, then drank it herself. "I suppose this should be champagne. Tori, let me be the first to welcome you into our happy family." "Be quiet," Margaret hissed, and got no more than a shrug from her daughter. "Do you think I don't know why you're doing this?" she said to Cade. "To spite me, to punish me for some imagined wrongs. I'm your mother, and as such I've done my best by you since the day you were born." "I know that." "Depressing, isn't it?" Faith murmured. Cade merely glanced at her, shook his head. "I've nothing to spite or to punish you for. I'm not doing this to you, Mama. I'm doing it for me. I've had a miracle in my life. Tori came back into it." He took her hand again, found it icy, drew her up beside him. "And I found out I'm capable of more than I imagined. I'm capable of loving someone and of wanting to do my best by her. I'm getting the best of the bargain here. She doesn't think so, won't even after this. But I know it, and I intend to treasure it. By tomorrow, Judge Purcell will have my new will drawn up. I will cut you both off without a penny." She aimed her furious gaze at Faith. "Not a cent, do you understand? Unless you stand with me now. You have no personal stake in this woman," she said to Faith. "I will see to it that you receive your share, and Cade's, beginning with the fair market value of your interest in the Marsh House and the Market Street property." Faith contemplated her wine. Now what would that fair market value be?" "In the vicinity of 100,000, Cade told her. "I can't speak for what my share of our mother's estate might be, but I would assume it edges quite a bit closer to 7 figures. "Ooh," Faith pursed her lips. "Imagine that. So all that will be mine if I just toss Cade to the wolves, so to speak, and do what you want me to do?" She waited a beat. "Now when, I wonder, have I ever done what you wanted, Mama?" "You would be wise to think this through." "Second question. When have I ever been wise? Do you want wine, Cade, or would you rather a beer?" "I will not make this offer a second time," Margaret said coldly. "If you insist on going through with this farce, I will leave this house, and you and I will have nothing more to say to each other." "I'll be sorry for that." Cade's voice remained calm. "I hope you'll change your mind, given time." "You would choose her over your own family, your own blood?" "Without a moment's hesitation." "I'm sorry you've never felt that way about anyone. If you had, you wouldn't question it." "She'll ruin you." Gathering herself, Margaret looked at Tori. "You think you were clever to hold out. You believe you've won. But you're wrong. In the end, he'll see you for what you are, and you'll have nothing." The words were there, just there, making her understand she'd only been waiting to say them. "He sees me for what I am. That's my miracle, Mrs. Lavelle. Please don't make him choose between us. Don't make all of us live with that. I had another child who chose you, and she paid a high price for it. Now you'll take a second. I'll make arrangements to leave immediately," she said to Cade. "Have the decency to keep her away from me until they're complete." "Well, well," Faith poured a second glass as her mother walked away. "That was pleasant." "Faith, oh, don't give me that look," she said, brushing Cade off. "I don't imagine either of you were particularly entertained, but I was, enormously. God knows she had it coming. Here," she pushed the wine into Tori's hand. "You look like you could use this. Go talk to her, Cade. You can't leave it like this. If he tries, I'll lose all this new respect and admiration I have for him." Rising to her toes, Faith kissed his cheek. "Looks like she didn't ruin both of us after all." He took her hand and held it. "Thank you." "Oh, darling, it was my pleasure." Holding her glass aloft, she dropped into a chair, grinning when Bea leaped into her lap. "I, for one, plan to celebrate." "What? Cade's announcement that he intends to marry me, or your mother's unhappiness?" Faith tilted her head as she studied Tori. "I can do both, but apparently you can't. You have too much sensibility and kindness. Oh, she'd hate that. One more thing to celebrate," she decided, and sipped her wine. "That's unattractive, Faith," Cade murmured. "Oh, let me crow for a minute, will you? Not everyone's as high-minded as the two of you. Good Lord, you really suit each other. Who'd have thought it? I'm happy for you. Imagine that. I'm sincerely happy for you. I believe I feel a little mushy inside." Try to control this embarrassing display of sentiment. Impatient with her, Cade turned to Tori, ran his hands up her arms, down again to her wrists. I need to get something out of my office, then we'll go. Will you be all right? Cade, talk to your mother. No. He kissed her lightly. I won't be long. Drink your wine, Faith suggested when they were alone. It'll put some color back in your cheeks. I don't want any wine. Tori set the glass aside, then walked to the window. She wanted to be outside again where she could breathe. If you insist on looking unhappy, you'll only spoil this for Cade. He did this because he loves you. And why did you? Interesting question. A year ago, oh hell, likely a month ago, I might have taken her up on it. That's a powerful chunk of money, and I do like what money can buy. No, you wouldn't have done it, not ever, and I'll tell you why. Tori glanced back. First, it would have been to throw it back in her face, but second, and more than the first, it would have been for Cade, because you love him. Yes, I do. And love doesn't come easy to either of us. My mother saw to that. Would you blame her for everything? No, just what she's entitled to. I screwed up my life plenty all on my own, but he didn't. He never did damage to himself or anyone else. I love him tremendously. Surprised, Tori glanced over. Faith's eyes were still bright, but there were tears in them. He didn't say what he did to her to hurt her, but because it was truth, I would have said it to hurt her. Feel sorry for her if you must, but don't expect it of me. He has a chance with you, and I want to see him take it. Why didn't you tell him that? I'm telling you. I see what he feels for you, and I wish I could feel it for someone. Not to make myself a better person. I like myself the way I am. Still, if someone matters that much... Contemplatively, she studied the wine in her glass, the light that shined through it from the window. If someone matters that much, it's bound to take something out of you. She shifted her gaze to Tori. Isn't it? Yes, but I'm beginning to think it's something you don't need anymore. Not if someone loves you back. Interesting. That's a nut to chew on. She looked over as Cade came in. I suppose you want to be alone now. Yes. Then Bea and I will just take ourselves off, won't we? She nuzzled the dog, then nudged her onto the floor. In fact, I think we'll go out and stay out till the air clears. She touched Cade's cheek as she walked by. I'd suggest you do the same. Not quite yet. He waited until he heard the door close behind his sister, then held out a hand for Tori. I want to do this here. We can consider it closing a circle. Cade, that was difficult for you, for all of you. No, it wasn't. And it's done. You and I were just beginning. He took a box from his pocket and opened it. The diamond caught the sunlight, exploded with it. This was my grandmother's, and it came to me. Panic choked her. Don't. She tugged at her hand, but he held her fingers firm in his. It came to me, he repeated, with the hope that one day I'd give it to the woman I wanted to marry. I didn't give it to Deborah. It never occurred to me to give it to her. I suppose I knew I was keeping it for someone else, that I was waiting for someone else. Look at me, Tori. It's all so fast. You should take more time. 20 years or 2 months. Time's never been the point for us. If you can't believe and trust what I say, if it isn't enough to steady you, look at what I feel. He lifted her hand to his heart. Look in me, Tori. She couldn't refuse or resist, and the heat of it slid into her, warmth and strength and hope. His heart beat steady under her palm. His eyes never wavered from hers. Trust, she thought. He was trusting her with all that he was. The next step was hers. I wish you could look in me, because I don't know how to tell you what I feel. Scared because there's so much of it. I never wanted to be in love with anyone again. But I didn't know it could be different. I didn't know it could be you. You're so steady, Cade. Smiling now, she lifted a hand to toy with his hair. You steady me. Marry me. Oh, God. She took a deep breath. Had to take a second. Yes. She looked down as he slipped the ring on her finger. It's beautiful. I get dizzy looking at it. It's a little big. He ran a thumb around the gold band. You have delicate hands. We'll have it sized. Not right away. I want to get used to it first. She closed her hand into a fist, let out a sigh. She loved him. Her eyes swam as she lifted them again. Your grandmother. She loved him. Her name was Laura, and she was happy. So will we be, he promised. She let herself believe him. Carl D. kept the siren on and the speedometer at 80 straight up I-95. It wasn't called for, of course, but it did give him a nice little kick, and God knew it entertained J.R. He shut it down as they approached their turnoff. Maybe we ought to be doing this on Sundays instead of fishing. Gets the blood moving, J.R. agreed. Hard to feel like an old fart when you're highballing down the road. Who you calling an old fart? Tell you what I'll do, J.R., if you think it'll make it smoother for you. I'll drop you off at your sister's place, then I'll go and check in with Sheriff. Give you time to talk to her and for her to get her things together. I appreciate that. J.R.'s mood plummeted, but he did his best to bolster it. She's not going to want to budge, so it'll take a little doing. I figure I'll tell her we're pretty sure Han's still around Progress, so she'll be closer to him if she comes on along with me. Well, it may just be the truth, and that being the case, I'm going to put extra patrols on your street. I want you to start using that fancy alarm system Boots talked you into a couple of years back. Been using it since you found the Bellows girl. Boots says she doesn't get a minute's rest unless we got it on. He thought of his town, the streets he could walk with his eyes shut, the people he knew by name, and all who knew him. That's not the way it's supposed to be. No, sometimes that's the way it is. You and me, J.R., we grew up one way. We've seen the changes come into Progress, and most of them's good. We bend to 'em, maybe lose a little something when they plant houses in a field where we used to play ball, or put up another Jiffy Mart and talk about goddamn strip malls outside of town, but we bend. Some changes you have to meet another way altogether. J.R. smiled a little. What the hell does that mean? Damned if I know. Is this a turn for her place? Yeah, road's rough. You're going to want to mind your oil pan. I'm ashamed for you to see how she's living, Carl D. Put that aside. We've been friends too long for that kind of shit. The cruiser bumped, scraped. Wincing, Carl D. slowed to a crawl. Then peering ahead, his eyes narrowed. What the hell's this? God damn it, there's trouble. God damn it, he repeated, and hit the gas so they took the rest of the rutted road in wild bumps. Two cruisers sat nose to nose outside the house. Yellow police tape was stretched around the scruffy yard. Even as he hit the brakes, the uniform standing on the sagging porch stepped down. Chief Russ, out of Progress. He fumbled out his ID, held it up for the uniform to scan. What happened here? We had an incident, Chief Russ. The officer's face was pale and coldly set, his eyes concealed behind dark glasses. I'll have to ask you to stay here. The sheriff's inside. He'll need to clear you. This is my sister's place, J.R. snatched at the cop's sleeve. My sister lives here. Where's my sister? You'll have to speak with the sheriff. Please stay behind the line, he ordered, and strode into the house. Something's happened to Sarah Beth. I have to... Hold on. Carl D. grabbed his arm before J.R. could rush forward. Just hold on. There's nothing you can do. Let's just hold on. He'd already spotted the dark stain on the dirt outside the chicken coop and a second smearing near the overgrown grass. Sheriff Bridger was a hefty man with a face seamed by years and weather. His eyes were faded blue and set in by lines that looked burned into the skin by the sun. He scanned the area as he stepped out, took a moment to wipe beads of sweat from his brow, then walked toward the waiting men. Chief Russ? That's right, Sheriff. I brought Mr. Mooney here up to fetch his sister, Sarah Beth Bodine. What happened here? Bridger shifted his pale eyes to J.R. You brother to Sarah Beth Bodine? Yes. Where's my sister? I'm sorry to tell you, Mr. Mooney. We had trouble here sometime early this morning. Your sister's dead. Dead? What are you talking about? That can't be. I talked to her not 2 days ago. Not 2 days back. Carl D., you said they had police here, right here, looking out for her. That's right, we did. And I lost a man this morning, too. A good man with a family. I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Mooney, and I'm sorry for theirs. J.R., you just sit down now. I want you to sit till you get your legs under you. Carl D. opened the car door, nudged his friend down on the seat. J.R.'s face was alarmingly red, and his big frame had started to shake. You mind having somebody bring him some water, Sheriff? With a nod, Bridger turned to signal the uniform. Purdy, bring Mr. Mooney here a glass of water. You sit here now. Carl D.'s knees popped like firecrackers when he crouched down. You sit here and catch your breath. Let me do what I can do. I just talked to her, J.R. repeated. Friday evening I talked to her. I know it. Just you sit here until I get back. He stepped away from the car, moving until he was out of J.R.'s hearing. Can you tell me what happened here? We've been putting it together for the last few hours. Flint, he caught the 2 to 10 shift. We didn't know there was trouble until his relief showed up and found him over there. Bridger gestured toward the coop. They'd taken his man off to the morgue, zipped in a black bag. He was not going to forget it. He caught a round in the back, took him down. He was young, strong. He tried getting back to his unit here, crawled over 15 feet with that round in him, had his weapon out, had his weapon in his hand. Somebody put a gun in his ear and pulled the trigger. He was 33 years old, Chief Russ. Got a 10-year-old boy and an 8-year-old girl at home. I take responsibility. They're without a father now. I sent him over here. We knew Bodine was dangerous, but we didn't know he was armed. Never used a firearm in any of his other doings. The motherfucker shot my man in the back. Carl D. wiped the back of his hand over his mouth. And Miss Bodine? Sarah Beth. Sari Mooney, who'd sat on his mom's front porch, ate at her table. My guess is she knew he was coming. Had a suitcase packed. There's an empty coffee can in the bedroom and looks to me like she might have kept her house cash in it. Gone now. Door was open, unforced. She let him in or he walked in. He shot her twice, once in the chest, once in the back of the head. Carl D. shoved the sorrow aside, eyed the situation of the house, the land. Guess you've done a canvass. Yeah, talked to the neighbors. Finally got somebody to say they heard what maybe was gunshots about 5:30 this morning. People mind their own around here. Nobody paid any attention to it. The heat was merciless. Carl D. dragged out a handkerchief and rubbed it over his face as sweat soaked through his fishing shirt. How the hell did he get here? Can't say. Hitched a ride, maybe, stole a car. We're looking into it. For the money in a coffee can, don't sit right. She had a suitcase packed? That's right. Her clothes in it and some of his. She knew he was coming. We're checking the phone records. Got to figure he called her, and she gave him the lay of the land. She wasn't what you'd call cooperative with the police around these parts. And he blamed her, though she was dead as Eve, for the murder of his man. Mr. Mooney, going to be up to doing a next-of-kin ID on her? Yeah. Carl D. rubbed his mouth again. He'll do it. You informed the deceased mother yet? No, I was going to handle that back at the office. I'd appreciate it if you'd let me do that, Sheriff Bridger, not wanting to step on your ground here, but she knows me. You're welcome to that part of the job. It ain't one I relish. Fine, then. I'll take J.R. on by his mama's. It'll be easier for them that way. All right. He's a cop killer now, Chief Russ. If it gives your friend there any comfort, you let him know that bastard won't be able to run far enough or fast enough. You keep me up to date, Sheriff, and I'll do the same. I got the Federals coming tomorrow or the day after. They'll want to pay you a call. Welcome to, but this is my turf, and that was my man they carried away in a bag this morning. Bridger spat on the ground. Bodine better pray to his almighty God the feds get to him before I do. Miles away, Hannibal Bodine tore into a pork chop. He'd gotten it along with bread and cheese and a bottle of Jim Beam from a house he'd broken into. It had been simple enough, with the family gone off to church. He'd watch them stroll out of the house in their fancy Sunday clothes and pile into a shiny minivan. Hypocrites, going to church to show off their material goods, into the house of the Lord to flaunt themselves. God would punish them just like he punished all the proud and pompous. And God had provided, he thought, as he gnawed the pork bone clean. He'd found plenty of food in that big house, meat wrapped up from last night's dinner, enough to restore his body, and drink to sustain him in his hour of need. This was his trial, his test, this wandering in the wilderness. He tossed the bone aside and took a long drink from the bottle. For a time he'd despaired. Why was he being punished, a righteous man? Then it all came clear. He was to be tested. He was to prove his worthiness. God had shouldered him with temptation time and time again. There'd been times he'd been weak, times he'd succumbed, but now he was given this chance. Satan had lived in his house, under his roof, for 18 years. He had done his best to drive the devil out, but he had failed. He would not fail again. He lifted the bottle, let the heat of the whiskey strengthen him. Soon, very soon, he would complete the task that had been given him. He would rest, he would pray, then the way would be shown to him. He closed his eyes and curled up to sleep. The Lord provided, he thought, and laid his hand over the gun tucked beside him. 27. Tori watched Chief Russ's car drive slowly down her lane, make the turn onto the road to Progress. She sat where she had since her uncle had told her about her mother, where she'd lowered herself inch by inch into the old rocker on the front porch. It was her stillness that worried Cade, her stillness and her silence. Tori, come on inside and lie down a while. I don't want to lie down. I'm all right. I wish I weren't so all right. I wish I felt more than I do. There's a blankness inside me where there should be grief. I'm trying to write something on it, and I can't. What am I that I can't feel grief for my own mother? Don't push yourself. I felt more grief and pity for Sherry Bellows, a woman I met once. I felt more shock and horror for a stranger than I do for my own blood. I looked in my uncle's eyes and I could see the pain there, the sadness, but it's not in me. I've got no tears for her. Maybe you've shed enough of them already. Something's missing inside me. No, it's not. He came around now, knelt in front of her. She stopped being part of your life. It's easier to mourn a stranger than it is someone who should have been part of you and wasn't. My mother is dead. They believe my father killed her. And the question in my mind, most prominently in my mind at this moment, is why do you want to take on someone who comes from that? You know the answer. And if love isn't enough, we'll add sense. You aren't your parents any more than I'm mine. The life we'll begin and build together is ours. I should walk away from you. That's sensible. And I suppose loving, too. But I won't. I need you. I want so much what we might have together, so I won't do the courageous thing and walk away. Darling, you wouldn't get 2 feet. She let out her breath in a shaky laugh. Maybe I know it, Cade. It was so easy to touch him, to brush her fingertips over the gilt edges of his hair. Would we have come together, do you think, if Hope had lived? If nothing that happened had happened and we'd just grown up here like normal people? Yes. Sometimes your confidence is a comfort. She walked to the end of the porch to look at the trees that tucked the marsh into shadows. This is the second time since I've come home someone has died. The second time I thought it would be me he came for. He'll come yet. He won't get near you. Yes, she thought his confidence could be a comfort. He'll have to come. He'll have to try. She steadied herself, turned back. Can you get me a gun? Tori, don't say you'll protect me or that the police will find him, stop him. I believe all those things as far as they go, but he will come back for me, Cade. I know it as truly as I know anything. I must be able to defend myself if I have to, and I will defend myself. I won't hesitate to take his life to save my own. I might have once, but I have too much at stake now. I have you now. There was a sick dread in his stomach, but he nodded. Saying nothing, he walked to his car and opened the glove compartment. He'd started carrying the revolver with him since Sherry Bellows' murder. He brought it back to Tori. This is a revolver, .38. It's smaller than I imagined. It was my father's. Cade turned the old Smith & Wesson over in his hand. What you call a hideout gun, I suppose because it's compact. Do you know how to fire it? She pressed her lips together. It looked sinister and efficient in Cade's hand, the elegant farmer's hand. Pull the trigger? Well, there's a little more to it than that. Are you sure about this, Tori? Yes. She let out a breath. Yes, I'm sure. Come on, then. We'll go out in the yard and I'll give you a lesson. Faith sang in a voice surprisingly light and sweet as she carried groceries up the stairs into Wade's apartment. Bee scrambled after her, sniffing the air that held memories of countless dogs, cats, and pet rodents. Delighted with herself, Faith shifted bags, managed the knob, and bumped the door open with her hip. On a ragged pad in the living room, Mongo was lying with his head on his paws. His tail thumped and his head lifted as Faith walked in. "Why, hello there. You're looking lots better, you big old thing. Bee, Mongo's recuperating. Don't chew on his ears. He'll swallow you in one bite." But Bee was already sniffing, nibbling, and nudging. "Well, I guess the two of you better get acquainted. Where's the doctor?" She found him in the kitchen, staring into a cup of coffee. "There he is now." She dumped her bags on the counter, then turned to wrap her arms around his neck from behind and kiss the top of his head. "I've got a big surprise for you, Doc Wade. You're going to get yourself a home-cooked supper, and if you play your cards right, a romantic interlude will follow dessert." There was a machine gun burst of barking from the living room that sent her scurrying out. "Now, isn't that the cutest thing? Wade, you ought to come out and see this. They're playing together. Well, this big dog here's pretty much squashing Bee with one paw, but they're having such a time." She was still laughing when she came back, then stopped when she saw Wade's face. "Honey, what's the matter? Did something go wrong with the horse out at the Hill place last night?" No. The mayor's fine. My aunt, my father's sister, she's dead. She was murdered early this morning. Oh, my God! Oh, Wade, that's awful! What is going on around here? She sat down across from him, wishing she knew what to do. Your daddy's sister Tori's mama? Yes, I haven't seen her in Christ. I don't even remember the last time. I can't even get a picture of her in my head. That's all right now. It's not all right. My family's ripping itself apart. For God's sake, Faith, they think my uncle killed her. It was the horror in his eyes that had her pushing back her own. He's a bad man, Wade, a bad and dangerous man, and nothing to do with you. I'm sorry for Tori, I swear I am, and for your aunt and your family, but, well, I'm going to say it even if it makes you mad at me. She chose him, Wade, and she stayed with him. Maybe that's a kind of love, but it's a bad kind. It's a sorry kind. We don't know what goes on in other people's lives. Oh, hell, we don't. We're always saying that, but we do know. I know what went on in my parents' lives. I know that if either of them had had any gumption, they'd have made their marriage work or they'd have ended it. Instead, my mother clung to the Lavelle name like it was some sort of prize, and Papa took up with another woman. And whose fault was that? I spent a long time letting myself believe it was the other woman's, but it wasn't. It was Papa's for not honoring his marriage vows and Mama's for tolerating it. Maybe it's easier to say this is all Hannibal Bodine's fault, but it's not, and it sure as hell isn't yours or Tori's or your daddy's. She pushed back from the table. I wish I could think of nice things to say, of soft and comforting things to say, but I'm just no good at it. I guess you want to go on over to your daddy's. No, he kept his eyes on her face as he had since she'd begun to speak. He's better off with my mother. She'll know what to do for him. Who the hell would have thought you'd know what to do for me? He held out a hand. When she took it, he pulled her close, turned his face into her belly. Stay, will you? Of course I will. She stroked a hand down his hair. Her insides were a little shaky, an odd feeling. We'll just be quiet a while. He held on, as surprised as she that she would be an anchor for him. I've been sitting here since my father called. I don't know how long, half an hour, frozen inside. I don't know what to do for my family. You will. When the time comes to do it, you always do. You want me to fix you some fresh coffee? No, thanks. No. I have to call my grandmother and Tori. I have to figure out what to say first. With his eyes closed and his face pressed against her, he listened to the dogs barking in the next room. I'm going to keep Mongo. I know it, honey. His leg's doing all right. It'll take a while to heal yet, but he'll be fine. A little gimpy, maybe. I was going to find him a good home, but I can't. He looked up puzzled. What do you mean you know it? I never keep dogs. You hadn't found the right one yet, is all. His eyes narrowed on her face, but his dimples deepened as they did when he was amused. You're getting a little too wise for comfort. It's the new me. I kind of like it. And this new you cooks supper? On rare occasions. I got us a couple of steaks in there and the trimmings. She walked to the counter, dug in the bag, and pulled out 2 white candles. Lucy down at the market asked me what kind of evening I'd planned, buying red meat and white candles and a fancy cheesecake in a box. He smiled a little and rose from his chair. And what did you tell Lucy down at the market? I told her I was fixing a romantic dinner for 2, for myself and Dr. Wade Mooney. A number of interested ears pricked at that tidbit of information. She set the candles down. I hope you don't mind that I was indiscreet and that we will now find ourselves the subject of considerable talk and speculation. No. He slid his arms around her, laid his cheek on her hair. I don't mind. Lissy, honey, I don't feel right about this. Now, Dwight, we're paying a grievance call on friends and neighbors. Trying to find comfort, Lissy shifted on the seat of the car, hauling her belly up with one arm. Tori's just lost her mother, and she'll appreciate some sympathy. Tomorrow, maybe. Dwight gave the road ahead a pained look. The next day. Why, she won't feel up to making herself a decent meal now, will she? So I'm taking her a nice chicken casserole, help keep her strength up. Lord, it will be trying for her. Despite her pious sigh, there was a lively fascination dancing inside her. Tori's own mother shot dead by her own father. Why, it was just like something out of the tabloid papers or out of Hollywood. And since she'd dragged Dwight out of the house hardly an hour after the news hit, she'd likely be the first to get a look at Tori. Not that she wasn't sympathetic to Tori. Naturally she was. Hadn't she taken that casserole her mother had made for her to heat up after the baby came and brought it along? Food was for death, everyone knew that. She's not going to feel up to company, Dwight insisted. We're not company. Why, I went to school with Tori. The both of us have known her since we were children. I couldn't bear the idea of her being alone at such a time. Or, she thought, of someone else getting there first. Besides all that, Dwight Fraser, you're mayor. It's your duty to call on the bereaved. Goodness, watch these bumps, honey. I have to pee again. I don't want you getting too upset or excited. He reached over to pat her hand. No going into labor out here, Lissy. Don't you worry. But it pleased her that he did. I've got 3 weeks left at least. Goodness, how do I look? Anxious, she flipped down the vanity mirror. I must look a fright, rushing out the way I did, a big, fat, frightful cow. You're beautiful. Still the prettiest girl in progress and all mine. Oh, Dwight. She flushed rosily and fluffed her hair. You're so sweet. I just feel so fat and ugly these days, and Tori's so slim. Skin and bones. My woman's got curves. He reached over to rub her breast and made her squeal. Stop that. Giggling, she gave his hand a swat. Shame on you. Now look, we're almost there and you got me all flustered. She snuck her hand between his legs. Got yourself flustered, too. Remember how we used to park out this way when we were young and foolish? And I talked you into the back seat of my daddy's car. Didn't take much talking. I was just crazy about you. The first time we made love, it was out here. It was so dark, so sexy. Dwight, she walked her fingers up his leg. After the baby comes and I get my figure back, let's have Mama come over and babysit. You and I'll drive on out here and see if you can still talk me into the back seat. He blew out a breath. Keep talking like that, Lissy, and I'm not going to be able to get out of this car without embarrassing myself. Slow down a little. I want to put some lipstick on anyway. She dug a tube out of her purse. Mama said she'd keep Luke overnight. We should go by and see Boots and J.R. after we leave Tori's. I guess they'll have the funeral up around Florence. We'll have to go, of course, represent the town, and so on. I don't have any black maternity dresses. I suppose I'll have to make do with the navy, even though it has that pretty white collar. People will understand, don't you think, if I wear navy blue? And we'll have to send flowers. She chattered until they turned into the lane. Dwight was no longer aroused, but he was getting a vague headache. 15 minutes, he promised himself. He'd give Lissy 15 minutes to fuss over Tori. Then he was taking her home and making her put up her feet. That way he could get himself a beer, kick back, and watch whatever was on ESPN. Nobody in Progress was going to do any grieving over Sarah Beth Bodine except her immediate family. He didn't see why deaths so far removed from him and his town need occupy more than the minimum amount of his time, personal or official. He'd pay his duty calls, then forget it. I don't know why anybody would want to live way out here without a single soul for company, Lissy said as Dwight hauled her out of the car. Then again, Tori always was an odd one, rare as a two-headed duck, my mama would say. Then again, she trailed off and gave Cade's car a significant look. I guess she doesn't lack for company after all. I swear I can't see those two together, Dwight, not for a New York minute. They can't have a thing in common, and as far as I can see, Tori's not the kind to keep a man very warm, if you know what I mean. She's good-looking enough if you like that type. She's nothing compared to Deborah Purcell. I can't for the life of me figure what Cade sees in her. A man in his position could have his pick of women. God knows I've tried to steer him toward plenty of them. Dwight said and uh-huh and yes, honey, a couple of times as he got the casserole dish out of the car. It wasn't necessary to actually listen to his wife when she started on one of her ramblings. After several years of marriage, he had her rhythm down so that he managed to punctuate her statements at the appropriate times without having a clue what she was talking about. The system served them both well. I imagine he'll get tired of her before much longer and they'll drift apart the way people do when they don't have a real bond like we do. She fluttered at him, gave his arm a little pat, and he read the signal correctly. He glanced down and gave her a warm and loving look. Once he's shaken loose again, we'll have to have him over for dinner with, maybe Crystal Bean. I might even be able to find some nice man for Tori, more her kind. That'll take some doing, as I don't think there are many men who'd be willing to take on such a strange one. I swear sometimes she'll just look at me and give me the shivers, if you know what I mean. Tori! She exclaimed it when Tori opened the door and immediately opened her arms. Oh, honey, I'm just so sorry about your mother. Dwight and I came the minute we heard. You poor thing, now why aren't you resting? I was sure Cade would have you lying down at a time like this. The embrace was smothering and hot. I'm all right. Of course you're not all right, and you don't have to pretend with us, old friends. She flapped her hand against Tori's back. Now I want you to sit down and I'm going to make you a nice cup of tea. I brought you a casserole here. I want you to have a hot meal. Keep your strength up during this painful time. Kate?" She released Tori to turn her attention on Kate as he came in from the kitchen. "I'm glad you're here seeing to Tori. Time like this she needs all her friends. Now you come on with me, honey." She slipped an arm around Tori's waist as if to support her. "Dwight, you bring that dish on back to the kitchen so I can warm it up for Tori." "Lissy, that's very kind of you," Tori began. "Nothing kind about it, not between friends. I know you must be half out of your mind right now, but we're here for you. Whatever's said or done, you can count on us. Isn't that right, Dwight, honey?" "Sure it is." He gave Kate a pained look as Lissy pulled Tori toward the kitchen. "I couldn't stop her," he murmured. "She means it for the best." "I'm sure she does. It's a terrible thing, terrible. How's Tori holding up?" "She's coping." Kate glanced back toward the kitchen where Lissy's voice ran on and on. "I'm worried about her, but she's coping. They're saying that it was Hannibal Bodine who did it. Word's spreading fast. I figured you'd want to know what's being said. It's going to get worse, I expect, before it gets better." "I don't think it gets any worse. Chief Russ give you any updates on the manhunt?" "He's playing it close. I guess he's got to. Haven't had anything like this around here since you lost your sister, Cade." He hesitated, then shifted the dish still in his hands. "Can't be easy on you either, bringing all that back again." "No, it's not. But I'll tell you the way it's starting to look, and that might close this off once and for all. It's starting to look like it might have been Bodine who killed Hope." "Killed?" He took a long breath, blew it out again as he too glanced toward the kitchen. "God almighty, Cade. I don't know what to say, what to think." "Neither do I yet. Dwight, come on and bring me that casserole, will you?" "On the way," he called back. "I'll move Lissy along soon as I can. I know you don't want company." "I appreciate it, and I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't mention Tori's father's connection to Hope, to Lissy or anyone just yet. Things are hard enough on Tori right now." "You can count on me. I mean that, Cade. You let me know what you want done and when, and I'll see to it." He managed to smile. "You and me and Wade, we go back, all the way back." "I will count on you. I do. There was a sudden squeal from the kitchen that had Dwight bolting across the room in alarm. He burst in to see Lissy, eyes wide, mouth open, with Tori's hand clutched in hers. "Engaged? Why, I just can't believe it. Dwight, look here what Tori's wearing on her finger, and neither of 'em saying a word about it." She jerked Tori's hand forward, her own face alive with the bliss of being, she was sure, the first to know. "Isn't this something?" Dwight studied the ring, then looked into Tori's eyes. He saw the fatigue, the embarrassment, the faint irritation. "It sure is. I hope you'll be very happy." "Of course she'll be happy." Lissy dropped Tori's hand so she could waddle around the table and hug Cade. "Aren't you the sly one, never letting on, then snapping Tori up so fast? Why, her head must still be spinning. We have to celebrate, drink a toast to the happy couple." "Oh." She stopped, had the grace to flush even if her eyes continued to dance. "What am I thinking? I'm just a scatterbrain, that's all. Oh, honey, you must be so torn." She scurried back to Tori as quickly as she could manage. "Getting engaged and losing your mama this way so close together. Life goes on, you remember that. Life does go on." Tori didn't bother to sigh, but she did manage to get her hand in her lap before Lissy could grab it again. "Thank you, Lissy. I'm sorry. I hope you understand, but I need to call my grandmother. We have to see about arrangements." "Of course we understand. Now I want you to let me know if there's anything I can do, anything at all. Nothing's too big or too small. Dwight and I are more than happy to help, aren't we, Dwight?" "That's right." He put his arm firmly around Lissy. "We'll go on now, but you can call us if there's anything you need. No, don't you get up." He steered Lissy toward the doorway. "We'll let ourselves out. You call now, you hear?" "Thank you." Imagine that, imagine it. Lissy could hardly wait until they'd gotten to the front door. Wearing a diamond big enough to blind you, and on the day she finds out her daddy killed her mama. I swear, Dwight, I don't know what to think. She'll be planning a wedding and a funeral at the same time. I told you, didn't I tell you she was a strange one? "You told me, honey." He nudged her into the car and shut the door. "You surely told me," he murmured. Inside, Cade sat at the table. For a moment he and Tori studied each other in silence. "Sorry," he said at length. Dwight's my friend, and she comes along with him. She's a silly woman, not particularly crafty, not particularly mean. She thrives on other people's business, good and bad. Right now she doesn't know which to highlight. Here's Victoria Bodine in the middle of a tragedy and a scandal, And here she is again, engaged to one of the most prominent men in the county. Tori paused, glanced down at the ring on her finger. It was a jolt to see it there, she thought. Not a bad sensation, just an odd one. Such bulletins, she continued. It all must be rattling around in her head like marbles, clinking together as there isn't much else in there to get in the way. His mouth twitched. Is that speculation, or did you take a look? There's no need to, and I don't do that anyway when everything she's thinking runs riot over her face. Dwight would never have gotten her out so quickly if she hadn't been jumping to get to the phone and start spreading the word. And that bothers you? Yes. She pushed back from the table, wandered to the window. Odd that it comforted somehow to look out into the dark shadows of the marsh. I knew when I came back here I'd be under the microscope. I understood that, and I'll deal with it. My mother, I'll deal with that too. There's nothing else I can do. You don't have to deal with it alone. I know. I came back here to face myself, I suppose, to resolve or at least accept what had happened to Hope, and my part in that. I expected the talk, the looks, the speculation and curiosity. I planned to use them to build my business. I have, and I'll keep on using them. That's cold. No, it's good sense. Tough maybe, but not cold. I came back for me, she said quietly, to prove I could. I expected to pay for it, to quiet the restlessness inside me, but to pay for it. I never expected you. She turned back. I never expected you, Cade, and I don't know quite what to do with all of this feeling I have inside me for you. He got to his feet, crossed to her to brush her hair back from her face. You'll figure it out. This is so easy for you. I guess I've been waiting for you. Cade, my father, what he is, part of that's in me. You have to consider that. You have to weigh it in. Do I? He gave her a considering look as he turned her to walk toward the bedroom. You're probably right. I suppose I should give you the same opportunity to weigh in my great-grandfather Horace, who engaged in a long lascivious affair with his wife's brother. When she discovered it, and in what you can imagine was her shocked distress, threatened to expose him, Horace, along with his lover, displeased by this reaction, dismembered her and kept the alligators fat and happy for several days. You're making that up. No, indeed. He drew her down on the bed. Well, the business about the alligators is family legend. There are some who say she simply fled to Savannah and lived to the age of 96 in mortified solitude. Either way, it isn't a proud footnote in the Lavelle family history. She turned to him, found the curve of his shoulder, and rested her head there. I suppose it's a good thing I don't have any brothers. There you go. Sleep a while, Tori. It's just you and me here. That's what matters now. While she slept, he lay wakeful, listening to the sounds of the night. 28. I'm asking you to indulge me. Tori looked up at the peaks and lines of Beau Rêve. You're putting me between yourself and your mother again, Cade. That's not fair to any of us. No, but I need to speak with her, and I don't want you driving into town by yourself. I don't want you alone until this is over, Tori. Well, that makes two of us, so you can rest easy there, but I'd as soon wait in the car while you do what you have to do inside. Let's compromise. Oh, when did that word enter your vocabulary? He slanted her a slow and very bland smile. We'll go around back. You can wait in the kitchen. My mother doesn't spend a lot of time there. She started to object again, subsided. He would, she knew, simply roll over her excuses, and she was too worn out to fight about it. Too many dreams in the night, too many images sliding into her head in the day. When it was over, he said, as if it would be, as if it could. She got out of the car, walked with him around the garden path, through the wildly blooming roses, past the glossy-leafed camellia, where a young girl had once secreted her pretty pink bike, wound through the hills of azaleas with their blooms long since spent, and fragrant spires of lavender that would scent the air all the way into winter. The world was lush here, full of color and shape and perfume. A lazily elegant place of bricked paths and lovely benches set just so among the beds and shrubs, with overflowing pots of mixed blooms tucked artistically among the stream. The result was like a painting, meticulously executed. Margaret's world again, Tori realized, just like the studied perfection of the rooms inside. Nothing to mar it, nothing to change it. How wrenching it would be to have some invader burst in and skew the balance of it all. You don't understand her. Excuse me, your mother. You don't understand her at all. Intrigued, Cade laced his fingers with Tori's. Did I give you the impression I thought I did? This is her world, Cade. This is her life. The house, the gardens, the view she sees out the windows. Even before Hope died, it was the center for her. What she tended and preserved, and continued to after she lost her child. She could keep this, she said, turning to him. Touch it, see it. Make certain it didn't change. Don't take this from her. I'm not. He cupped Tori's face in his hands now, holding it up to his. But neither will I tolerate her using it or the farm as a threat to hold me under her thumb. I can't give her more than I've already offered, not even for you. There has to be a compromise, just as you said. One would think, he laid his lips on her brow, but sometimes with some people there's only yes or no. Don't take this on. He drew her back and his eyes were troubled. Don't ask me to, Victoria. The sound he made wasn't so much a sigh as a rush of air. Don't ask me to bargain our happiness against her approval. I've never had her approval to begin with. It was so strange to realize it, and all at once. He'd grown up in a castle and had been just as starved for kind words as she. It hurts you. I'm sorry, I didn't see that it hurts you. Old wounds. He ran his hands down her arms, laced fingers again. They don't bleed like they used to. But they would seep and trickle from time to time, she thought, as they began to walk again. No one had ever used a belt on him or fists. There were other ways to pummel a child. Even here in all this beauty, so far removed from the barren and stifling rooms of her childhood. Beautiful, yes, Tori thought as they walked under an arbor buried in morning glories, but lonely. That was just another word for barren. There should be someone sitting on the bench or clipping the gerberas for a basket. A child stretched belly down over the path studying a lizard or toad. The painting needed life and sound and movement. I want children. Cade stopped in his tracks. Excuse me. Where had that come from, and why had it popped out of her mind as if it had always been there? I want children, she repeated. I'm tired of empty yards and quiet gardens and tidy rooms. If we live here, I want noise and crumbs on the floor and dishes in the sink. I couldn't survive in all those perfect, untouched rooms, and that's something you can't ask me to do. I don't want this house without life inside it. The words rushed out of her mouth, and the panic riding in them made him smile. He remembered a young boy who'd wanted to build a fort, scrap wood and tar paper. This is such an interesting coincidence. I was thinking 2 children with an option for 3. Okay. She blew out a breath. All right. I should have known you'd already figured it out. I'm a farmer. We plan. Then we hope fate cooperates. He bent to pluck a sprig of rosemary from the kitchen garden. For remembrance, he said as he gave it to her. While you're waiting for me, remember we have a life to plan, as messy and noisy as we like. She went inside with him, and there was Lila, as she was so often, working at the sink. The air smelled of coffee and biscuits and the sweet rose scent Lila sprayed on every morning. You come in late for breakfast, she said. Lucky for you, I'm in a good mood. She'd been watching them for the last few minutes with a lightness of heart. They looked right together. She'd been waiting to see her boy look right with someone. Well, sit down. Coffee's fresh enough. I made up some flapjack batter nobody's bothered to eat. Is my mother upstairs? She is, and the judge is cooling his heels in the front parlor. Lila was already getting down mugs. Don't have much to say to me today. Been on the phone considerable and got her door shut. That sister of yours, she don't even bother coming home last night. Cade's stomach clutched. Faith's not home? Nothing to worry on. She's with Doc Wade. Breezed out of here yesterday saying that's where she'd be and I'd see her when I see her. Seems nobody sleeps in their own bed around here these days but me. Too damn hot for all these carryings on. Sit down and eat. I need to speak to my mother. Feed her, he ordered, pointing at Tori. I'm not a puppy, Tori muttered as he strode away. Don't go to any trouble, Lila. Sit down and take that martyr look off your face. It's his place to settle things with his mama, and not yours to fuss your head over it. She got out the griddle to heat, and you'll eat what I put in front of you. I'm beginning to think he takes after you. Why shouldn't he? I did most of the raising of him. I'm not speaking against Miss Margaret. Some women aren't built to be mothers, is all. Don't make them less, just makes them what they are. She got a bowl out of the refrigerator, peeled back the cover. I was sorry to hear about your mother. Thank you. Lila stood a moment, bowl in the crook of her arm, her eyes dark and warm on Tori's face. Some women, she said again, aren't built for mothering. That's why, just like the song says, God blesses the child who's got his own. You got your own, honey, you always did." For the first time since she'd heard the news of her mother's death, Tori wept. Cade stopped at the parlor first. Manners would never have permitted him to walk by an old family friend. "Judge?" Gerald turned, and the stern, contemplative lines of his face relaxed fractionally when he saw Cade. "I was hoping I'd have a chance to speak with you this morning. I hope you can spare me a minute." "Of course." Cade stepped in, gestured to a chair. "I hope you're well." "A little arthritis acts up now and again. Old age." Gerald gestured it aside as he sat. "Ever think it's going to happen to you, then you wake up one day and wonder who the hell that old man is in your shaving mirror." "Well," Gerald laid his palms on the knees of his trousers, "I've known you since you were born." "So there's no need to pick your words," Cade finished. "I'm aware my mother has spoken to you about some legalities and changes in her will. She's a proud woman, and she's concerned for you." "Is she?" Cade lifted his eyebrows as if fascinated by that information. "She needn't be. I'm fine, more than fine. If her concern is for Borev," he continued, "it's also misplaced. We're having a very good year, better, I think, even than last." Gerald cleared his throat. "Cade, I knew your father most of my life, was his friend. I hope you'll take what I have to say in that spirit. If you would postpone your personal plans, take a bit more time to consider. I'm fully aware of a man's needs and desires, but when those desires are put ahead of duty, of practicality, and most of all ahead of family, it can never come to good. I've asked Tori to marry me. I don't need my mother's blessing, or yours for that matter. I can only regret those blessings aren't forthcoming. Cade, you're a young man with your life in front of you. I'm only asking as a friend of both your parents for you to take time to consider, time you can well spare at your age, to look at the entire picture, particularly now that this tragedy has come into Tori Bodine's life. A tragedy, Gerald added, that speaks volumes of who and what she comes from. You were just a boy yourself when she lived here and were sheltered from the harder facts of life. What facts would they be? Gerald sighed. Hannibal Bodine is a dangerous man, undoubtedly ill in his mind. Such things come down in the blood. Now, I have every sympathy for the child, make no mistake, but there's no changing what is. Is this, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, or is it, as a twig is bent so it grows? Irritation flickered over Gerald's face. Either is apt. Victoria Bodine lived in that house under his hand too long not to be bent by it. Under his hand, Cade said carefully. Figuratively, and I'm afraid literally. Many years ago, Iris Mooney, Victoria's maternal grandmother, came to see me. She wanted to sue the Bodines for custody of the girl. She said Bodine beat the child. She wanted to hire you? She did. However, she had no proof of this abuse, no substantiation. I have no doubt, had none then, that she was telling the truth, but you knew, Cade said very quietly. You knew that he was beating her, putting welts and bruises on her, and you did nothing? The law, fuck the law. He spoke in that same deadly cool voice as he got to his feet. She came to you for help because she wanted to take a child out of a nightmare, and you did nothing. It was not my place to interfere with the Blood family. She had no proof. The case was weak. Flustered, Gerald rose as well. He was unused to being questioned or looked at with such disgust. There were no police reports, none from social services, just the word of a grandmother. If I had taken the case, nothing would have come of it. We'll never know, will we, because you didn't take the case. You didn't try to help. It was not my place, Gerald said again. It was your place. It's everyone's place. But she got through it without you, without anyone. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have personal business. He walked out quickly. Upstairs, Cade knocked on his mother's door. It occurred to him that there had often been closed doors in this house, barriers that required a polite request before they were removed. Manners forever took precedence here over intimacy. That would change. He could promise himself that. The doors of Borev would be open. His children wouldn't have to wait like company for an invitation to enter. Come in. Margaret continued to pack. She'd seen Cade drive up with that woman and had been expecting him to knock. She assumed he would ask her to change her mind about leaving, would attempt to reach a compromise. He was a deal-maker, she mused, as she laid tissue paper between precisely folded blouses, as his father had been. It would give her enormous satisfaction to listen to his requests and offers and refuse them all. "I'm sorry to disturb you." The prologue came automatically. He'd said the same thing countless times when admitted to her rooms. "And I'm sorry you and I find ourselves at odds." She didn't bother to look over. "I've made arrangements to have my luggage picked up this afternoon. I will naturally expect the rest of my belongings to be shipped to me. I have a partial list of what is mine. It will take a bit more time to complete. I've acquired a number of possessions in my years in this house." "Of course. Have you decided where you'll be staying?" The smooth tone of the question had her hands fumbling, her gaze darting toward him. "I've made no permanent arrangements. Such things require careful consideration." "Yes. I thought you might be more comfortable in a house of your own and somewhere nearby, as you have ties to the community. We own the property at the corner of Magnolia and Main. It's an attractive brick house, 2 stories, with a well-established yard and garden. It's tenanted at the moment, but the lease runs out in just over 2 months. If you're interested, I'll give the tenants notice." Staggered, she stared at him. "How easily you put me out." "I'm not putting you out. The choice is yours. You're welcome to stay here. It's your home and can continue to be. But it will also be Tori's home. You'll see what she is eventually, but she'll have ruined you by then. Her mother was trash, her father is a murderer, and she herself is nothing but an opportunist, a calculating sneak who never knew her place. Her place is here with me. If you can't accept that and her, then you'll have to make your place elsewhere." Sometimes, for some people, the answer was yes or no. It occurred to him that this time it applied to him as much as his mother. "The house on Magnolia is yours if you want it. If, however, you prefer to go elsewhere, Borev will acquire the property of your choice." "Out of guilt?" "No, Mama, I have no guilt for taking my happiness or loving a woman I also admire and respect." "Respect?" Margaret spat out. "You can speak of respect?" "Yes, I've never known anyone I respect more. So guilt plays no part here, but I will see to it you have a comfortable home. I need nothing from you. I have money of my own." "I know that. Take whatever time you need to decide. Whatever that decision is, I hope you'll be happy with it, or at least content. I wish—" He closed his eyes a moment, weary from maintaining the facade of manners. "I wish there was more between us than this. I wish I knew why there can't be. We disappoint each other, Mama. I'm sorry for that." She had to press her lips together to stop their trembling. "When I leave this house, you'll be dead to me." Grief swam into his eyes, swirled there, then cleared away. "Yes, I know." He stepped back, then quietly shut the door between them. Alone, Margaret sank onto the bed and listened to the silence. Cade gathered what paperwork he thought he'd need over the next day or two and listened to his phone messages while he loaded his briefcase. He needed to check in with Piney, return calls from the factory, and run by a couple of the rental units. There was a board meeting the next day, but that could be rescheduled. His quarterly meeting with his bookkeeper couldn't. He'd just have to find a safe place to plant Tori for a few hours. He glanced at his watch, picked up the phone. Faith answered, her voice slurred with sleep. "Where's Wade?" Down with a Cocker Spaniel or something. What time is it?" "It's after 9. "Go away, I'm sleeping." "I'm coming into town. Tori's with me. She's making noises about going into the shop. She doesn't plan to open today, but I expect she wants to find something to keep her busy. I want you to keep an eye out, then go over and stay with her." "Maybe you didn't hear me. I'm sleeping." "Get up. We'll be there within a half hour." "You're awful damn bossy this morning." "I don't want either of you alone until Bodine's in custody. You stick with her, you hear? I'll be back around as soon as I can." "What the hell am I supposed to do with her?" "You'll think of something. Get up," he repeated, then broke the connection. Satisfied, he carried his briefcase downstairs. The first thing he noticed was that Tori's plate was nearly cleared. The second was that she'd been crying. "What's wrong? What did you say to her?" "Oh, stop fussing." Lila swatted him off like a fly. "She's had herself a nice weep, and she's the better for it. Isn't that so, little girl?" "Yes, thanks. I can't eat any more, Lila. I really can't." Lips pursed, Lila studied the plate, then nodded. "You did all right." She glanced over at Cade. "Will Miss Margaret or the judge be wanting breakfast?" "I don't think so. My mother's made arrangements to leave this afternoon." "She's going through with it." "Apparently." "I don't want you staying here alone, Lila. I thought you might like to visit your sister for a couple of days." "I could do that." She picked up Tori's plate to carry it to the sink. "I'll wait and see if it's all the same to you, Cade. I'll check in later. Best thing, her going. She breaks free of this house, she'll be the happier for it in the long run." "I hope you're right. You called your sister," he said, and held out a hand for Tori. Tori got to her feet and after a moment's hesitation stepped over to press her cheek to Lila's. "Thank you. You're a good girl. Just remember to hold on to your own." "I'm going to." She waited until they were outside in the car and driving down the tree-lined lane away from the house. "I don't want a big wedding." Cade arched his brows. "Okay. I'd like to do it as quietly as possible and as—" "And?" He made the turn onto the road. Tori glanced out the window toward the edges of the swamp. "And as soon as possible." Why? How like him to ask, she thought, and turned to him again. "Because I want to start our life. I want to begin." "We'll arrange for the license tomorrow. Will that suit you?" "Yes." She laid a hand over his. "That suits me fine." Smiling at him, she saw nothing, felt nothing from the marsh, or what waited in it. Faith strolled across to Southern Comfort when she saw Cade's car pull up. She put on a big smile and hooked her arm companionably through Cade's. "There you are. I thought you'd forgotten." "Forgotten? Remember, honey, you said I could borrow your car today. Here you go." She dropped her own keys in his hand and fluttered her lashes. "So sweet of you, too. Isn't he just the best brother, Tori? He knows I have a partiality for his little convertible, and he's always letting me borrow it." She nipped the keys out of Cade's fingers, then gave him a big, noisy kiss. "Tori, I'm just bored silly with Wade so busy today. I'm just going to keep you company a while, all right? I'm thinking of buying Wade one of those fat candlesticks you've got in here." Smoothly, she transferred her grip from Cade to Tori. "His place could sure use some fixing up." "Well, you've seen it yourself, so you know. Looks like I'm going to be spending more time there, and I just can't abide that primitive male decor of his. Car's around the back of Wade's building," she called out to Cade as she steered Tori toward the door. "It's low on gas." With a last glance at Cade's annoyed face, Tori unlocked the shop. "Was the car a bribe?" "No, he didn't bother to offer a bribe. He woke me up this morning, so he's got to pay a price. He wants us looking out for each other." "Where's your dog?" "Oh, she's having a fine time at Wade's." Faith turned to the window and waved cheerfully to Cade. "Oh, he's steaming. He just hates for me to drive this toy of his." "So naturally you drive it as often as possible." "Naturally. Got anything cold to drink? It's hot enough to steal your breath out there today." "In the back. Help yourself." "Are you opening today?" "No, I don't want people today, so don't be offended if I ignore you." "Same goes." Faith slipped into the back room and came back with 2 bottles of Coke. Tori had the music on low and was busy with glass cleaner and a cloth. "You might as well give me something to do before I die of boredom." Tori held out the cloth. "You ought to be able to manage this. I have plenty of work in the back. Please don't let anyone in. If someone comes to the door, just tell them we're closed today." "Fine by me." She shrugged as Tori went into the back, then entertained herself by rearranging stock to her liking, imagining what it would be like to run a shop. Entirely too much work, she decided, too much trouble, though it was fun to be around so many nice things and speculate who would buy what. She found the keys for the jewelry case behind the counter and tried on several pairs of earrings, admired a bracelet fashioned out of a coil of silver, and tried that on as well. When someone knocked on the door, she jumped guiltily and closed the display. She didn't recognize the faces. The man and woman stood outside the door studying her as she studied them. It was a shame, Faith thought, that Tori wasn't open. At least customers would be a diversion. Faith smiled brightly and tapped the closed sign. The woman held up a badge. Whoops. The FBI, she thought. An even better diversion. She unlocked the door. "Miss Bodine?" "No, she's in the back." Faith took a moment to size them up. The woman was tall and tough with short black hair and cool dark eyes. She wore what Faith considered a very unflattering gray suit and dead ugly shoes. The man had more potential, with curling brown hair and a square jaw with a sexy little dent in it. She tried the smile on him and got the faintest glimmer of response. "I've never met an FBI agent before. I guess I'm a little flustered." "Would you ask Miss Bodine to come out?" the woman requested. "Course. Just excuse me for 1 minute. Y'all wait right here." She hurried to the stockroom and closed the door behind her. "It's the FBI." Tori's head snapped up. "Here?" "Right out there. A man and a woman, and nothing like those 2 on the TV show." He's not half bad, but she's wearing a suit I wouldn't be buried in. She's a Yankee, too. I don't know about him. He hadn't opened his mouth. Ask me. She runs the show. For God's sake, what do I care about that? Tori got to her feet, but her knees were shaking. Before she could steady herself, there was a brisk knock on the door, and it opened. Miss Bodine? Yes, I'm Special Agent Tatcha Lynn Williams. The woman showed her badge again. And this is Special Agent Marks. We need to speak with you. Have you found my father? Not at this time. Has he contacted you? No, I haven't seen him or heard from him. He'd know I wouldn't help him. We'd like to ask you some questions. Williams gave Faith a pointed look. Instantly, Faith scooted behind the desk to wrap an arm around Tori's shoulder. This is my brother's fiancée. I promised him I'd stay with her. I won't break my word to my brother. Marks took out his notebook, flipped pages. And you would be? Faith Lavelle. Tori's going through a very distressing time. I'm staying with her. You're acquainted with Hannibal Bodine? I know him, and I believe he killed my sister 18 years ago. We have no evidence of that, Williams said flatly. Miss Bodine, when did you last see your mother? In April. My uncle and I went to see her. I've been estranged from my parents for a number of years. I hadn't seen her since I was 20, or my father either, until he came here to my shop. And at that time you were aware he was a fugitive? Yes. Yet you gave him money. He took money, Tori corrected, but I'd have given it to him to keep him away from me. Your father was physically violent with you. All of my life. Giving in, Tori sat. And with your mother? No, not really. He didn't have to be. I believe he battered her in more recent years when I wasn't there, but that would be speculation. I'm told you don't have to speculate. Williams glanced up, fixed her eyes on Tori's face. You claim to be psychic. I don't claim anything. You were involved in several cases of abducted children a few years ago. What would that have to do with my mother's murder? You were friends with Hope Lavelle. Marks picked up the pattern smoothly, slid into a chair himself while his partner remained standing. Yes, very good friends. And you led her family and the authorities to her body. Yes, I'm sure you have the reports. There's nothing I can add to them. You claim to have seen her murder. When Tori didn't respond, Marks leaned forward. Recently, you enlisted the aid of Abigail Lawrence, an attorney in Charleston. You were interested in a series of sexual homicides. Why? Because they were all killed by the same person who murdered Hope. Because each of them was Hope to him at a different age. You sense this, Williams commented and drew Tori's gaze. I know this. I don't expect you to believe me. If you know this, Williams continued, why didn't you come forward? To what purpose? To amuse someone like you? To have what happened to Jonah Mansfield dragged up again and my part in it thrown in my face? You know all there is to know about me, Agent Williams. Marks took a plastic bag from his pocket, tossed it on the desk. Inside was a single earring, a simple gold hoop. What can you tell me about that? Tori kept her hands in her lap. It's an earring. One of the things we know is you're very cool under fire. Williams stepped forward. You were interested enough in the murders to gather information on them. Aren't you interested enough to see what you can pick up, let's say, from that? I've told you all I can about my father. I'll do whatever I can to help you find him. Marks picked up the bag. Start with this. Was it my mother's? Without thinking, Tori snatched it out of his hand, broke the seal, then closed her fingers over the earring. She opened herself, wanting this last connection more than she'd realized. She shivered once, then dropped the earring onto the desk. The mate's in your pocket, she said to Williams. You took them off as you were driving into town. Put this one in here. Her eyes tracked up, stayed level. I'm not required to put myself on display for you. I apologize. Williams stepped forward to pick up the earring. I do know quite a bit about you, Miss Bodine. I was interested in the work you did in New York. I've studied the Mansfield case. She slipped the earring back into her pocket. They should have listened to you. She gave her partner a quiet look. I intend to. There's nothing more I can tell you. She got to her feet. Faith, would you show them out, please? Sure. Williams took out a card, laid it on the desk, then followed Faith out of the storeroom. Minutes later, Faith came back in, took out a fresh Coke, and settled down in the chair Marks had vacated. You could tell that just by touching that earring. You knew it was hers and all that just by touching it? I have work to do. Oh, get over yourself. Faith took a long swig from the bottle. I swear, I've never known anybody takes every damn thing so serious. What we ought to do is go buy ourselves some lottery tickets or run on up to the racetrack. Can you tell with horses? I don't see why you couldn't. For God's sake. Well, why not? Why can't you have some fun with it? It doesn't have to be some dark, depressing wait. Oh, I've got it. Better than horses. We'll go to Vegas and play blackjack. Jesus Christ, Tori, we'd break the bank in every casino. It's not something to profit from. Why not? Oh, of course, I forgot this is you. You'd rather mope about it. Poor little me. Faith dabbed an invisible hanky under her eye. I'm psychic, so I must suffer. The insult was so huge, Tori couldn't imagine why her lips wanted to twitch into a ridiculous grin. I'm not moping. You would, given half a chance. I'm an expert on moping. She edged a hip onto the desk. Come on over to Wade's with me. You can, brush up against him or whatever and find out what's going on in his head about me. I will not. Oh, be a pal. No, you're such a bitch. That's right. Now go away and put that bracelet back where you got it. Fine. It's not my style anyway. She leaned over the desk. What am I thinking right now? Tori glanced up and her mouth quivered. It's inventive, but anatomically impossible. She swiveled back to her keyboard. Faith, thanks. With a sniff, Faith pulled open the door. For what? For deliberately annoying me so I wouldn't mope. Oh, that, my pleasure. It's so easy after all. 29. Wait, honey. Faith cocked the phone on her shoulder and peered over the counter toward the storeroom where it seemed to her Tori had been holed up for 10 days. You busy? Me? Of course not. I just finished neutering a dachshund. Another day in paradise. Oh, what exactly do you... No, never mind. I don't think I want to know. How's my baby? I'm just fine. And how are you? I meant Bee. Is she all right? Usurped by puppy breath. He let out a weighty sigh for form. She's enjoying herself. I'm sure she'll tell you all about her first day at work later. I'm having a first day at work, too, sort of. Faith studied, with a surprising sense of satisfaction, the glass displays she'd polished to a sparkle. What time do you think you're going to be done over there? I should be wrapped up by 5:30. What'd you have in mind? I have Cade's convertible, and I was thinking how it would be if we took us a long drive. It's so hot and sticky. I'm not wearing a thing but that red dress. With a sly smile on her face, she twirled a lock of hair around her finger. You remember my red dress, don't you, honey? There was a long, long pause. You're trying to kill me. Her laugh was low and satisfied. I'm just trying to be sure, since we've been spending a lot of time lately having conversations and so forth, that a certain part of our relationship isn't neglected. I can get behind that. Then why don't we take that drive? We could find us a cheap motel and play traveling salesman. What are you selling? This time her laugh was long and robust. Oh, honey, just trust me. The price is going to be right. Then I'm buying. We'd have to drive back late tonight or early tomorrow morning. I have appointments. That'll be fine. She was getting used to this making plans business. Wade? Yeah? You remember how you said you were in love with me? I seem to recollect something of the sort. Well, I think I love you back, and you know what? It doesn't feel half bad. There was another long pause. I think I can get out of here by 5:15. I'll pick you up. She hung up and danced around the counter. Tori, come on out of there. Might as well be in jail, she stated as she pulled open the door. Tori merely looked up from her inventory list. You've never actually had a job, have you? What would I want one of those for? I have an inheritance. Fulfillment, self-satisfaction, the pleasure of completing a task. All right, I'll work with you. Have they built a ski lift in hell? No, really, it might be fun, but we'll talk about that later. Now, you have to come along with me. I got to run home and get some things together. Go ahead. Where I go, you go. I promised Cade. And we've played here your way for, she checked her watch, rolled her eyes, almost 4 hours. I haven't finished here. Well, I have. And if we stay here the rest of the day, those FBI people might come back. All right. Tori tossed down her pencil, but I promised my grandmother I'd be at my uncle's by 5. That's perfect. I'll drop you off there before I pick up Wade. Grab us a couple of Cokes, honey. I'm just parched. Faith breezed out to freshen her lipstick in one of Tori's decorative mirrors. Since when do you have a reflection? Tori asked sweetly as she brought out the bottles. Unoffended, Faith slipped the top on the lipstick tube and dropped it in her purse. You're just cross because you've been holed up in your cave all day. You're going to thank me when we get out on the road and I open up that beauty of Cade's. Get some wind in your hair. It might actually have a little style. There's nothing wrong with my hair. Not a thing if you want to look like an old-maid librarian. That's a ridiculous cliché and an insult to an entire profession. Faith stood another moment at the mirror, fluffed her own sleek blonde mane. Have you seen Miss Matilda down at the Progress Library lately? Despite her best intentions, Tori's lips quivered. Oh, shut up, she suggested, and shoved the Coke bottle into Faith's hands. That's what I like about you, always the snappy comeback. She gave her hair a toss, then started to leave. Well, come on. You change things. Tori scanned the shelves, the cases, noted the small shifts in stock. Snappy comebacks, Faith thought, and an eye like a damn hawk. So? She wanted to complain, nearly did on principle, but honesty got the better of her. It's not bad. Excuse me, I'm so overwhelmed with flattery I feel a little faint. In that case, I'll drive. The hell you will. Laughing, Faith danced out the door. As she followed, locked up, Tori realized she was enjoying herself. Dealing with Faith made it impossible to brood. The idea of a fast ride in an open car held a great deal of appeal. She'd focus on that, just that, and worry about the rest later. Fasten your seatbelt, she ordered as she slid into the passenger seat. Oh, right. The air's so thick you could chew it. Faith clicked her belt on, took out her sunglasses, then turned the key. Gunning the engine, she gave Tori a mischievous grin. Now for some mood music. She punched the CD button, flipping through until Bob Seger wailed out about rock and roll. Ah, classical. Perfect. We're about to see what you're made of, Victoria. Deliberately, Tori took out her own sunglasses, slipped them on. Stern stuff. Good. Faith waited for a break in traffic, then shot away from the curb in a screaming U-turn. She nipped through the light at the square seconds before it turned red. You're going to get a ticket before you get out of town. Oh, I bet the FBI's keeping our locals plenty busy. Jesus, don't you just love this car? Why don't you buy one of your own? Then I'd miss the fun of nagging Kay to death about borrowing it. She crossed the town limits and poured it on. The wind whipped over Tori's face, tore at her hair, and thrilled her blood. An adventure, she thought, as they streamed around turns. Foolishness. It had been a long, long time since she indulged in simple idiocy. Speed. Hope had loved going fast, riding her bike like it was a stallion or a rocket ship, daring the devil as she threw her arms high in the air and gave herself to the moment. Tori did the same now, throwing her head back and letting the speed and the music pour over her. The smells were summer, and summer was childhood. Hot tar melting under the searing sun, still water going ripe in the heat. She could race through the fields when the cotton had burst from its bolls and pretend she was an explorer on an alien planet. Do cartwheels across the road and feel the tar go soft under her palms, into the marsh that was any world she wanted it to be. Running there, running with the ground spongy under her feet, with the moss tumbling down and mosquitoes singing for blood, running away, with her heart pounding and a scream trapped in her throat, running. There's Kate! What? Tori jerked back, lightheaded, clammy, her eyes wide and nearly blind as she swiveled her head. There! Carelessly, Faith gestured toward the field where two men stood in a sea of green cotton. She gave the horn a cheerful toot, waved, and laughed. Oh, he's cursing us now, giving Piney an earful about his crazy, irresponsible sister. Don't you worry, she added smugly. He'll just figure I'm trying to corrupt you. I'm all right. Tori forced herself to breathe in, breathe out. I'm fine. Faith gave her a longer, more considering look. Sure you are. You sure go pale, though. Why don't you... Oh, shit! The rabbit darted across the road, a brown streak of confusion. Instinctively, Faith hit the brakes and swerved. The car fishtailed, squealed, and under her firm hands found its balance again. I just can't stand hitting anything, though God knows why they run out like that. Seems they wait for a car to come along, and... She trailed off as she looked at Tori again. The snicker escaped before she cleared her throat and slowed down. Uh-oh. Saying nothing, Tori looked down. Most of the Coke that had been in the bottle was now splattered all over her shirt. With two fingertips, she pulled it away from her skin and slanted her gaze to Faith. Well, gee whiz, I couldn't run down the little bunny, could I? Just do me a favor and get me home so I can change, okay? Tapping her fingers on the wheel, Faith swung into Tori's lane, kicking dust and gravel into the air as she braked. Laughing but cautious, Faith hopped out of the car. I'll run some cold water over that shirt while you clean up. Shame to ruin it, even if it is deadly ordinary. Classic. You keep believing that. Pleased with the diversion, Faith strolled up the steps. "You take your time straightening yourself up," she said as Tori pulled open the door. "You need it more than I do." "I don't suppose it takes long to look ready to hop in the next available bed." Grinning, Faith followed her into the bedroom, then making herself at home, she opened Tori's closet and poked through. "Hey, some of this stuff's not half bad. Get your fingers out of my clothes. This is a good color for me." She pulled out a silk blouse in a deep dusky blue, then turned to the mirror. "Brings out my eyes." Stripped down to her bra, Tori snatched the blouse and shoved the damp shirt at Faith. "Go make yourself useful." Faith rolled her eyes but headed out to rinse the shirt in the bathroom sink. "If you're not wearing it in the next few days, you could lend it to me. I was thinking Wade and I could have an evening at home tomorrow night. If things go as they're supposed to, I wouldn't have it on that long anyway." "Then it doesn't matter what you wear." "A statement like that just proves you need me." Faith splashed the shirt around in the bowl. "What a woman wears is directly related to how she wants a man to respond." Tori reached in her closet for a white camp shirt, frowned, then eyed the silk blouse. Well, why not? Tori buttoned the blouse and walked to the mirror to brush out her hair. It needed to be tamed and tied back, she told herself. She was going to comfort her grandmother, to do what she could to help hold what was left of her family together. It wasn't the time for the frivolous or the selfish now. Though God, she'd needed just that and wouldn't forget that Faith had provided it. Lifting her arm, she began to work her hair into a braid. The repetitive motion, the hum of the ceiling fan, lulled her until her eyes were half closed, and she was smiling dreamily into the mirror. She saw the rabbit dart out into the road, a panicked brown streak, running, fleeing from the scent of man. Someone was coming. Someone was watching. Her arms froze over her head, and the panic tripped her heart. The air went thick, heavy, edged with the faintest taste of stale whiskey. She scented him, prey to hunt her. In one leap she was at the nightstand, and the gun Kate had given her was in her hand. There was a whimper in the back of her throat, but she closed it off. All that came out was the ragged panting of fear. She rushed from the room just as Faith wandered out of the bathroom. "I left it soaking. You can wring it out when—" She saw the gun first, then Tori's face. "Oh, God," was all she managed before Tori grabbed her arm. "Listen to me. Don't ask questions. There isn't much time. Go out the front. Hurry. Get in the car and go for help. Get help. I'll stop him if I can." "Come on with me. Come on now." "No." Tori broke away, swung toward the kitchen. "He's coming. Go." She ran toward the back of the house to give Faith time to escape and to face her father. He kicked in the back door, lurched through. His clothes were filthy, his face and arms raw with scratches and the swollen bites of greedy insects. He swayed a little, but his eyes stayed steady on his daughter's face. He had an empty bottle in one hand and a gun in the other. "I've been waiting for you." Tori tightened her grip on the revolver. "I know. Where's that Lavelle bitch?" "Gone. Safe," Tori thought, then said, "There's no one here but me." "You lying little whore. You don't take 2 steps without that rich man's brat. I want to talk to her." He grinned. "I want to talk to both of you." "Hope's dead. There's just me now." "That's right, that's right." He lifted the bottle, then realizing it was empty, heaved it against the wall where it shattered like gunshots. "Got herself killed. Asked for it. Both of you asked for everything you got, lying and sneaking, touching each other in unholy ways." There was nothing but innocence between me and Hope. Tori strained her ears for the panther roar of Cade's engine, but heard nothing. "You think I didn't know?" He gestured wildly with the gun, but she didn't flinch. "You think I didn't see you swimming naked, floating in the water, splashing in it so it ran down your bodies?" It sickened her that he could twist a simple childhood memory into the profane. "We were 8 years old, but you weren't. The sin was in you, it always was. No, you stay back." She lifted the gun now, and the trembling ran from her shoulder to her fingertips. "You won't lay a hand on me again or anyone else. Didn't Mama give you enough money this time? Didn't she move fast enough? Is that why you did it?" "I never raised my hand to your mother unless she needed it. God made man head of the house. Put that down and get me a drink." "The police are on their way by now. They've been looking for you, for Hope, for Mama, for all the others." The gun jerked in her hand as he came forward. In her mind there was the hiss and snap of a Sam Brown belt. "You come near me and we won't wait for them. I'll end it now." "You think you worry me? You never had a lick of gumption." "Nobody's ever said that about me." Faith stepped up behind Tori. The little gun gleamed in her hand. "If she won't shoot you, I promise I will." "You said she was dead. You said she was dead." He was a big man with a long reach. In panic as much as fury, he lunged, knocking Tori hard against the wall. A gunshot rang out and the smell of blood drenched her senses. She stumbled back against Faith as her father howled and stormed out the broken doorway. "I told you to go." Teeth chattering, Tori went down to her knees. "Well, I didn't listen, did I?" Because her vision was going gray, Faith braced against the wall and shook her head fiercely. "I used Kate's car phone to call the police." "You came back?" "Yeah." Blowing little panting breaths, Faith bent over from the waist to try to get some blood back in her head. "You wouldn't have left me." There was blood. I smelled blood. Instantly, Tori was on her feet, jerking Faith upright again. "Are you shot? Did he shoot you?" "No, it was you. You shot him. Tori, snap out of it." Tori stared down at her own hand. The gun was still in it, shaking as if it were alive. With a little gasp of shock, she dropped it clattering to the floor. "I shot him?" "Your gun went off when he shoved you, I think. God, it happens so fast. There was blood on his shirt, I'm sure of that much. And I didn't fire. I think I'm going to be sick. I hate being sick." Sirens. Hearing them, Faith rested her head back against the wall. "Oh, thank God." Then she heard the roar of an engine and shoved away from the wall. "Oh, no. Oh, Jesus. Cade's car. I left the keys in the car." Before Tori could stop her, she was darting toward the front door. They burst out together in time to see the car squeal onto the road. "Cade's going to kill me." Tori drew in a breath like a sob, but when it came out, it was laughter. Edging toward hysteria, but laughter. "We just chased off a madman, and you're worried about your big brother? Only you." "Well, Cade can be pretty fierce." As much to comfort as to support herself, Faith draped an arm around Tori's shoulder. Tori let her head droop and closed her eyes. The scream of sirens battered her ears. She saw hands on the wheel of the car. Her father's hands, scored deep with scratches. She felt the speed, the dance of the tires as the car was whipped around, coming back, pushing for speed. The radio blaring hot rock, lights whirling. You see them in the rearview mirror as your eyes dart up. Panic, outrage, hate. They're getting closer. Your arm burns from the bullet and the blood drips. But you'll get away. God's on your side. He left the car for you, fast, faster. A test, it's just another test. You'll get away, have to get away. But you'll come back for her. Oh, you'll come back and you'll make her pay. Hands slicked with blood. The wheel spins out of your grip. The world rushes at you, shapes tumbling, screaming. Is that you screaming? "Tori, for God's sake, Tori, stop it, wake up." She came back, face down on the shoulder of the road, her body jerking, screams ripping through her head. "Don't do this. I don't know what I'm supposed to do." "I'm all right." Painfully, Tori rolled over, shielded her eyes with her arm. "I just need a minute." "All right. You went tearing out to the road when they drove by. I was afraid you were going to run right out in front of them. Then your eyes rolled back in your head and you went down." Faith dropped her head in her hands. "This is too much for me. This is just more than enough." "It's all right. It's over. He's dead. I think I figured that part out. Look." She pointed down the road. The flames and smoke pillared up and the sun bounced off the chrome and glass of the police cars circled in the distance. "I heard the crash, then a kind of explosion." "A fiery death," Tori murmured. "I wished it on him." "He wished it on himself." "I want Wade. Oh, my God, I want Wade." "We'll get someone to call him." Steadier, Tori got to her feet, held out a hand for Faith. "We'll go down and ask someone to call him." "Okay. I feel a little drunk." "Me too. We'll just hold on to each other." Arms wrapped around each other's waists, they started down the road. The heat bounced off the asphalt, shimmered on the air. Through the waves of it, Tori saw the fire, the spin of lights, the dull beige of the government car with the FBI agents beside it. "Do you see where he crashed?" Tori murmured. "Just across from where Hope, just on the bend of the road, across from Hope." She heard the car coming behind them, stopped, and turned. Cade leaped out, raced forward to wrap his arms around both of them. "You're all right. You're all right. I heard the sirens, then saw the fire. Oh, God, I thought—" "He didn't hurt us." Cade's scent was there, sweat and man. Hers. Tori let it fill her. "He's dead. I felt him die." "Shh, don't. I'm going to get you home, both of you." "I want Wade." He pressed his lips to the top of Faith's head. "We'll get him, honey. Come on with me. Hold on to me for now." "He took your car, Cade." Faith kept her eyes shut, her face pressed against her brother's chest. "I'm sorry." Kate only shook his head and held her tighter. Don't think about it. Everything's going to be all right. Clinging to control by a thread, he helped them into the car. As he drove forward, Agent Williams stepped out in the road and signaled. Miss Bodine, can you verify that's your father? She gestured toward the wreck. That Hannibal Bodine was driving that vehicle? Yes, he's dead. I need to ask you a few questions. Not here, not now. Cage shoved the truck back in first gear. You come to Beau Rev when you're done out here. I'm taking them home. All right. Williams looked past him toward Tori. Are you injured? Not anymore. Her mind went dull for a while. She was aware, in a secondary way, of Cade taking her into the house, leading her up the stairs. She drifted a little further away when he laid her on a bed. After a while, there was something cool on her face. She opened her eyes and looked into his. I'm all right, just a little tired. I got one of Faith's nightgowns. You'll feel better once we get it on you. No. She sat up, put her arms around him. Now I feel better. He stroked her hair gently. Then his grip vised around her and he buried his face in her hair. I need a minute. Me too, probably a lot of minutes. Don't let go. I won't. I can't. I saw y'all go by, Faith driving like a maniac. I was going to blister her good for it. She did it on purpose. She loves to agitate you. Well, she did, plenty. I stalked back over the fields, vowing to pay her back for it, with Piney walking along with me, grinning like an idiot. Then I heard the shot, like to stop my heart. I started running, but I was still a good piece from the road in the car when the police went by. I saw the explosion. I thought I'd lost you. He began to rock her. I thought I'd lost you, Tori. I was in the car with him in my mind. I think I wanted to be so I'd know the exact moment it was over. He can't ever touch you again. No, he can't touch any of us again. She rested her head on the strong curve of his shoulder. Where's Faith? She's downstairs. Wade's here. She can't keep still. He leaned back, let his gaze roam her face. She'll rev until she falls down, and he'll be there for her. She stayed with me just like you asked her to. She let out a sigh. I have to go to my grandmother. She's coming here. I called her. This is your home now, Tori. We'll get your things from the Marsh house later. That sounds like a very good idea. Dusk had fallen when she walked the gardens with her grandmother. I wish you'd stay here with us, Gran, you and Cecil. J.R. needs me. He lost a sister, one he wasn't able to save from herself. I lost a child. Her voice cracked. I lost her long ago. Still, no matter how you deny it, there's always that stubborn hope that you'll get it all back and put it right. Now that's gone. I don't know what to do for you. You're doing it. You're alive and you're happy. She clung to Tori's hand. She couldn't seem to stop holding, stop touching. We all have to make our peace with this in our own way. Iris drew in a steadying breath. I'm going to bury her here in Progress. I think that's the way it should be. She had some happy years here, and, well, J.R. wants it. I don't want a church service. I'm holding against him on that. We'll bury her day after tomorrow in the morning. If J.R. wants it, his minister can say a few words at the gravesite. I won't blame you, Tori, if you choose not to come. Of course I'll come. I'm glad. Iris lowered to a bench. The fireflies were out, bumping their lights against the dark. Funerals are for the living to help close a gap. You'll be better for it. She drew Tori down beside her. I'm feeling my age, honeypot. Don't say that. Oh, it'll pass. I won't tolerate otherwise, but tonight I'm feeling old and tired. They say a parent isn't meant to outlive the child, but nature and fate, they decide what's meant. We just live with it. We'll all live with this, Tori. I want to know you're going to take what's in front of you with both hands and hold it tight. I am. I will. Hope's sister knows how to do that. I'm taking lessons. I always liked that girl. She mean to marry my Wade? I think he means to marry her, and he's going to let her think it was her idea. Clever boy, and a steady one. He'll keep her in line without bruising her wings. I'm going to see both my grandchildren happy. That's what I'm holding on to tight, Tori. 30. Wade fought with the knot of his tie. He hated the damn things. Every time he put one on, it brought a flashback of his mother wearing an Easter hat that looked like an overturned bowl of flowers, strangling him into a bright blue tie to match his much-hated bright blue suit. He'd been 6 and figured it had traumatized him for life. You wore ties for weddings and you wore ties for funerals. There was no getting around it, even if you were lucky enough to have a profession that didn't require a goddamn noose around your neck every day of the week. They were burying his aunt in an hour. There was no getting around that either. It was raining, a thundering bitch of a storm. Funerals demanded lousy weather, he figured, just like they demanded ties and black crepe and overly sweet-scented flowers. He'd have given a year of his life to have crawled back in bed, pulled the covers over his head, and let the entire mess happen without him. Maxine said she'll be glad to look after the dogs, Faith announced. She walked in, dressed in the most dignified black dress she could find in her closet. Wade, what have you done to that tie? I tied it. That's what you do with ties. Mauled it's more like. Here, let me see what I can do. She plucked at it, tugged, twisted. Don't fuss. It doesn't matter. Not if you want to go out looking like you got a black goiter under your chin. My great Aunt Harriet had goiters, and they were not attractive. Just hold still a minute. I've nearly got it. Just let it be, Faith. He turned away from her to pick up his suit jacket. I want you to stay here. There's no point in your going out in this, or in both of us being wet and miserable for the next couple of hours. You've been through enough as it is. She set down the purse she'd just picked up. You don't want me with you? You should go on home. She glanced at him, then around the room. Her perfume was on his dresser, her robe on the hook behind the door. Funny. Here I was thinking that's just where I was. Is that my mistake? He took his wallet off the dresser, stuffed it in his back pocket, scooped up the loose change. My aunt's funeral is the last place you should be. That doesn't answer my question, but I'll pose another. Why is your aunt's funeral the last place I should be? For Christ's sake, Faith, put it together. My aunt was married to the man who killed your sister and who might have killed you just 2 days ago. If you've forgotten that, I haven't. No, I hadn't forgotten it. She turned to the mirror and, to keep her hands busy, picked up her brush. With every appearance of calm, she ran it over her hair. You know, a lot of people, probably most, believe I don't have much more sense than a turnip green, that I'm flighty and foolish and too shallow to stick to anything for longer than it takes to file my nails. That's all right. She set the brush down, picked up her bottle of perfume, and dabbed scent on her collarbone. That's all right, she repeated, for most people. But the funny thing is, I expect you to think better of me. I expect you to think better of me than I do of myself. I think considerable of you. Do you, Wade? Her eyes shifted and met his in the mirror. Do you really? And at the same time you think you can put on that irritable attitude and buzz me off today. Maybe I should just go get my hair done while you're at your aunt's funeral. Then the next time you have to deal with something difficult or uncomfortable, I'll go shopping. And the time after that, she continued, her voice rising, hardening, I'll just have moved on anyway, so it won't be an issue. This is different, Faith. I thought it was. She set the bottle down, turned. I hoped it was. But if you don't want me with you today, if you don't think I want to be with you today or have the belly for it, then this is no different than what I've already done. I'm not interested in repeating myself. Emotion stormed into his eyes, raged through him until his hands were fists. I hate this. I hate seeing my father torn to pieces this way. I hate knowing your family's been ripped again and that mine had a part in it. I hate knowing you were in the same room with Bodine, imagining what could have happened. Well, that's good, because I hate all those things too. And I'll tell you something maybe you don't know. As soon as it was over that day, as soon as I started thinking again, I wanted you. You were the one person I needed with me. I knew you'd take care of me and hold on to me and everything would be all right. If you don't need the same from me, then I won't let myself need you either. I'm selfish enough to stop. I'll go with you today and stand with you and try to be some comfort to you. Or I'll go back to Beau Rev and start working on getting over you. You could do it too, he said quietly. Why is it I admire that? Flighty? Foolish? He shook his head as he walked to her. You're the strongest woman I know. Stay with me. He lowered his forehead to hers. Stay with me. That's my plan. She slipped her arms around him, ran her hands up and down his back. I want to be there for you. That's new for me. It's your own fault. You kept at me till I was in love with you. First time I haven't aimed and shot first. I kind of like it. She held him, felt him lean on her. She liked that too, she realized. No one had ever leaned on her before. Now come on. She spoke briskly, kissed his cheek. We'll be late, and funerals aren't the kind of occasions where you make grand entrances. He had to laugh. Right. Got an umbrella? Of course not. Of course not. Let me get one. When he went to the closet to root around, she angled her head and studied him with a faint smile. Wade, when we get engaged, will you buy me a sapphire instead of a diamond? His hand closed over the handle of the umbrella, then simply froze there. Are we getting engaged? A nice one, not too big or gaudy, mind, square cut. That first moron I was married to didn't even get me a ring, and the second got me the tackiest diamond. She picked up the black straw hat she'd tossed on the bed and walked to the mirror to set it on her head at an appropriately dignified angle. Might as well have been a big hunk of glass for all the style it had. I sold it after the divorce and had a lovely 2 weeks at a fancy spa on the proceeds. So what I'd like is a square-cut sapphire. He took the umbrella down, stepped back out of the closet. Are you proposing, Faith? Certainly not. She tipped back her head to look down her nose. And don't think because I'm giving you some inclination of my response it gets you out of asking. I expect you to follow tradition all the way down on one knee. With, she added, a square-cut sapphire in your hand. I'll make a note of it. Fine, you do that little thing. She held out a hand. Ready? I used to think I was. He took her hand, laced his fingers firmly with hers. No one's ever ready for you. They buried her mother in rain that pelted the ground like bullets while lightning ripped and clawed at the eastern sky. Violence, Tori thought. Her mother had lived with it, died from it, and even now it seemed drew it to her. She didn't listen to the minister, though she was sure his words were meant to comfort. She felt too detached to need it and couldn't be sorry for it. She'd never known the woman inside the flower-draped box, never understood her, never depended on her. If Tori had grief, it was for the lack she'd lived with all her life. She watched the rain beat against the casket, listened to it hammer on the umbrella, and waited for it to be over. More had come than she'd expected and stood in a small dark circle in the gloom. She and her uncle flanked her grandmother with the sturdy Cecil just behind them, and Cade stood beside her. Boots, bless her easy heart, wept quietly between her husband and son. Heads were bowed as prayers were read, but Faith's lifted and her eyes met Tori's, and there was comfort so unexpected from someone who understood. Dwight had come, as mayor, Tori supposed, and as Wade's friend. He stood a little apart, looking solemn and respectful. She imagined he'd be glad to be done with this duty and get back to Lissy. There was Lila, steady as a rock, eyes dry as she silently mouthed the prayers with the minister. And oddly, Cade's Aunt Rosie in full black, complete with hat and veil. It had caught everyone off guard when she'd arrived with a trunk the night before. Margaret was staying temporarily at her place, she'd announced, which meant Rosie had immediately packed to stay temporarily elsewhere. She'd offered Tori her mother's wedding dress, gone yellow as butter with age and smelling strongly of mothballs, then had put it on herself and worn it the rest of the evening. When the casket was lowered into the fresh grave and the minister closed his book, J.R. stepped forward. She had a harder life than she needed to. He cleared his throat. And a harder death than she deserved. She's at peace now. When she was a little girl, she liked yellow daisies best. He kissed the one he held in his hand, then dropped it into the grave, and turned away to his wife. He'd have done more for her, Iris said, if she'd let him. I'm going to visit Jimmy a while, she told Tori, then we'll be going home. She took Tori's shoulders, kissed her cheeks. I'm happy for you, Tori, and proud. Kincaid, you take care of my little girl. Yes, ma'am. I hope you'll come stay with us, both of you, when you come back to Progress. Cecil bent down to touch his lips to Tori's cheek. I'll look after her, he whispered. Don't you worry. I won't. She turned, knowing she was expected to receive condolences. Rosie was right there, her eyes bird-bright behind her veil. It was a proper service, dignified and brief, reflects well on you. Thank you, Miss Rosie. We can't choose our blood, but we can choose what to do with it, what to do about it. She tipped up her face and looked at her nephew. You've chosen well. Margaret'll come around, or she won't, but that's not for you to worry about. I'm going to talk to Iris, find out who that big strapping man is she's got with her. She plowed through the wet in a $2,000 Chanel suit and Birkenstocks. Struggling against twin urges to laugh and weep, Tori laid a hand on Cade's arm. Go take her your umbrella. I'll be fine. I'll be right back. Tori, I'm very sorry. Dwight held out a hand and, clasping hers, kissed her cheek even as he shifted his umbrella to shield her from the rain. Lissy wanted to come, but I made her stay home. I'm glad you did. It wouldn't be good for her to be out in this weather today. It was kind of you to come, Dwight. We've known each other a long time, and Wade, he's one of my two closest friends. Tori, is there anything I can do for you? No, but thank you. I'm going to walk over and visit Hope's grave before I leave. You should go on back to Lissy. I will. Take this. He brought her hand up to the handle of the umbrella. No, I'll be fine. Take it, he insisted, and don't stay out in the wet too long. He left her to walk back to Wade. Grateful for the shelter, Tori turned away from her mother's grave to walk through the grass, through the stones, to Hope's. Rain ran down the angel's face like tears and beat at the fairy roses. Inside the globe, the winged horse flew. It's all over now. Doesn't feel settled yet, Tori said with a sigh. I have this heaviness inside me. Well, it's so much to take in at once. I wish I could. There are too many things to wish for. I never bring flowers here, Faith said from behind her. I don't know why. She has the roses. That's not it. They're not my roses, not mine to bring her. Tori looked behind her, then shifted so they were standing together. I can't feel her here. Maybe you can't either. I don't want to go in the ground when my time comes. I want my ashes spread somewhere. The sea, I think, as that's where I plan to have Wade ask me to marry him. By the sea. She might have felt the same, only hers would have been for the river or near it in the marsh. That was her place. Yes, it was. It is. It seemed important and natural to reach out a hand and clasp Faith's. There are flowers at Beau Rev. That was her place, too. I could cut some when the storm passes, take them to the marsh, to the river, put them there for Hope. Maybe it would be the right way, laying flowers on the water instead of letting them die on the ground. Would you do that with me? I hated sharing her with you. Faith paused and closed her eyes. Now I don't. It'll be clear this afternoon. I'll tell Wade. She started to walk away and stopped. Tori, if you get there first, I'll wait for you. Tori watched her go, looked back over the gentle slope, the curtaining rain, the gathering ground fog. There was her grandmother with Cecil strong at her back, Rosie in her veil, and Lila holding an umbrella over her. J.R. and Boots still by the grave of the sister he had loved more than he might have realized. And there was Cade with his friends, waiting. As she walked to him, the rain began to thin, and the first hint of sun shimmered watery light through the gloom. You understand why I want to do this? I understand you want to. Tori smiled a little as she shook rain from the spears of lavender she'd cut. And you're annoyed just a little that I'm not asking you to come with me. A little. It's counterbalanced by the fact that you and Faith are becoming friends, and all of that is overpowered by the sheer terror of knowing I'm going to be at Aunt Rosie's mercy until you return. She has a gift for me, and I've seen it. It's a moldy top hat, which she expects I will wear for our wedding. It'll go well with the moth-eaten dress she's giving me. I tell you what, you wear the hat, I'll wear the dress, and we'll have Lila take our picture. We'll put it in a nice frame for Miss Rosie, then we'll pack them away someplace dark and safe before the wedding. That's brilliant. I'm marrying a very wise woman. But we'll have to take the picture tonight. We're getting married tomorrow. Tomorrow, but... Here, he said as he turned her into his arm, quietly, in the garden. I've taken care of most of the details, and we'll get to the rest this afternoon. But my grandmother, I spoke with her. She and Cecil will be staying another night. They'll be here. I haven't had time to buy a dress, or your grandmother mentioned that and hoped you'd be receptive to wearing the one she wore when she married your grandfather. She's running up to Florence to get it this afternoon. She said it would mean a lot to her. Thought of everything, didn't you? Yes. You have a problem with that? Oh, we're going to have lots of problems with that over the next 50 or 60 years, but just now, no. Good. Lila's baking a cake. JR's bringing a case of champagne. The idea brightened him considerably. Thank you. Since you're grateful, I'll just add, Aunt Rosie plans to sing. Don't tell me. She drew back. Let's not spoil the moment. Well, since everyone has approved the schedule and the details, who am I to object? Have you arranged for the honeymoon, too? She saw him wince and rolled her eyes. Cade, really? You're not going to argue about a trip to Paris, are you? Of course not. He gave her a quick kiss before she could. You might want to close the shop for a few days, but Boots really liked the idea of running it for you, and Faith had some ideas. Oh, God. But that's up to you. Thank you very much. She pushed a hand through her hair. My head's spinning. We'll discuss all this when I get back. Sure, I'm flexible. The hell you are, she muttered. You just pretend to be. She shifted the basket of flowers, handed him the shears. Don't start naming the children while I'm gone. Exasperating man, she thought as she slid into her car and set the basket of flowers on the seat, planning their wedding behind her back. Planning exactly the sort of wedding she wanted, too. How irritating and how lovely to be known that well. So why wasn't she relaxed? As she turned onto the road, she shifted her shoulders. She just couldn't quite break through the tension. Understandable, she reminded herself. She'd been through a hideous ordeal. She couldn't imagine getting married within 24 hours with so much still tied up inside her. But she wanted to begin. She wanted to close this door and open the next. She glanced at the flowers beside her. Maybe she was about to. She pulled off onto the side of the road where Hope had once parked her bike, and climbing out, she crossed the little bridge where tiger lilies burst into storybook bloom, then took the path she knew her friend had taken that night. Hope Lavelle, Girl Spy. The rain had turned to steam, and the steam rose out of the ground in curling fingers that broke apart, then twined together again around her ankles. The air was thick with wet, with green, with rot, mysteries waiting to be solved. As she approached the clearing, she wished she'd thought to bring some wood. Everything would be too damp to start a fire, and perhaps it was foolish to want to in all the heat, but she wished she'd thought of it and could have laid one the way Hope had. Just thinking of it, remembering it, she caught a drift of smoke. There was the fire, small and carefully built to burn low, a little circle of flame with long, sharpened sticks beside it waiting for marshmallows. She blinked once to clear the vision, but the fire simmered and the smoke puffed sluggishly in the mist. Dazed, Tori stepped into the clearing, the basket tipping to spill out flowers at her feet. Hope? She pressed a hand to her heart almost to make sure it continued to beat, but the marble child who'd been her friend stood in her pool of flowers and said nothing. With a trembling hand, she picked up one of the sticks and saw that the cuts to sharpen it were fresh. Not a dream, not a flashback, but here and now, real. Not hope, never again hope. The pressure rose up in her, a hot gush of fear and of knowledge. In the brush came a rustling, wet and sly. She whirled toward it. Password! She thought it, heard it sound in her head. But she wasn't Hope. She wasn't 8, and dear God, it wasn't over after all. Cade was in the garden deciding where they should set up tables for the wedding reception when Chief Russ pulled in. Glad you're here. I just got news I thought you should know. Come on inside where it's cool. No, I got to get back, but I wanted to tell you in person. We got ballistic reports on Sarah Beth Bodine. The gun she was killed with wasn't the same one Bodine had with him, not even the same caliber. Cade felt one quick knock of dread. I'm not sure I understand. Turns out the one Bodine had when he broke in on Tori and your sister was stolen from a house about 15 miles south of here on the morning Tori's mother was killed. House was broken into between 9 and 10 a.m. that same day. How can that be? Only way it could be is as if Bodine sprouted wings and flew down here from Darlington County, or if somebody else put those bullets in Miss Bodine. Carl D. cupped a hand over his chin and rubbed it hard. His eyes burned with fatigue. I've been in touch with those Federals, and I'm piecing it together. The phone records show Miss Bodine got a call just after 2 that morning from the payphone outside the Winn-Dixie north of town here. Now, we were figuring that would have been Bodine calling her from here, telling her he was coming for her, and that's fine as far as it goes, but it don't fit when you add the rest. It had to be Bodine calling her. Why else would she have packed up? I can't say. But you got him calling from here at around 2 in the morning, getting up there, doing the shooting between 5 and 5:30, then heading back here, moving south another 15 miles, breaking into a house and stealing a gun, a bottle, and some leftover supper. Now, why would the man be zigzagging back and forth that-a-way? He was crazy. I won't argue with that, but being crazy doesn't make him able to all but break land and speed records in one morning, especially since it doesn't look like he had any kind of vehicle. Now, I'm not saying it couldn't be done. I'm saying it don't make sense. What kind of sense does it make otherwise? Who else would have killed Tori's mother? I can't answer that. I got to work with facts here. He had the wrong gun. We got nothing to show the man had a car. Now, could be we'll find one yet, and the gun that he used on his wife, that could be. He took his handkerchief out of his pocket, wiped the back of his neck. But it appears to me, if Bodine didn't do those murders up in Darlington County, maybe he didn't kill anyone. That means whoever did's still walking free. I was hoping to have a talk with Tori. She's not here. She's... White-hot fear burned through his belly. She's gone to Hope. Tori opened herself, tried to feel him, gauge him, but all she saw was dark, cold, blank dark. The rustling moved in a circle, a taunting. She turned with it even as the saliva dried up in her mouth. She turned to face it head on. Which of us did you want that night, or did it matter? It was never you. Why would I want you? She was beautiful. She was a child. True. Dwight stepped out into the clearing. But so was I. It broke her heart, one quick snap. You were Cade's friend. Sure, Cade and Wade like twins themselves, rich and privileged and handsome. And I was their chubby little token, Dwight the dweeb. Well, I fooled 'em all, didn't I? He'd have been 12, she thought, staring at the easy smile on his face. No more than 12 years old. Why? Call it a rite of passage. They were always first, one or the other of them, always first in everything. I was going to be the first one to have a girl. Amusement, it couldn't be anything but amusement, danced in his eyes. Not that I could brag on it, kind of like being Batman. Oh, God, Dwight. Hard for you to see that, you being a female. We'll call it a guy thing. I had a bad itch. Why shouldn't it have been my good friend Cade's precious sister I used to scratch it? He spoke so calmly, so casually that the birds continued to sing, liquid notes that ran like tears. I didn't know I was going to kill her. That just happened. I'd snuck some of my daddy's whiskey, drink like a man, you know. My mind was a little fuzzy. You were only 12. How could you want such a thing? He circled the clearing, not really coming closer, just stalking, a patient, anticipatory cat and mouse. I used to watch the two of you skinny dipping or sprawled out here on your bellies telling secrets. So'd your old man, he said with a grin. You might say I was inspired by him. He wanted you. Your old man wanted to fuck you all right, but he didn't have the guts. I was better than him, better than any of them. I proved it that night. I was a man that night. Town mayor, proud father, devoted husband, loyal friend. What kind of madness could hide so well? You raped and murdered a child. That made you a man? All my life I heard, be a man, Dwight. The amusement died out of his eyes so they turned cold and blank. For Christ's sake, be a man. Can't be a man if you're a virgin, can you? And no girl would look twice at me. I fixed that. That night changed my life. Look at me now. He spread his arms, stepped closer, watching her. I got confidence, got myself in shape, and didn't I end up with the prettiest girl in progress? I got respect, a beautiful wife, a son, I got position. It all started that night. All those other girls. Why not? You can't imagine what it's like, or maybe you can, yeah, maybe you can. You know how to feel it, don't you? Their fear. While it's happening, I'm the most important person in the world to them. I am the world to them. There's a hell of a kick to that. She thought of running. The idea whipped in and out of her mind, and she saw the gleam in his eyes, saw he was waiting for her to do just that. Deliberately, she slowed her breathing and opened herself. There was the blankness again, like a pit, but around the edges was a kind of ugly hunger. Recognizing it, anticipating it, was the only weapon she had. You didn't even know them. Dwight, they were strangers to you. I just imagine their hope, and it's that first night all over again. They're nothing but tramps and losers until I make them into her. It wasn't the same with Sherry. I didn't want to wait. He shrugged. Lissy isn't much on sex these days, can't blame her, and that sexy little teacher, she wanted it from Wade, those stupid bitch. Well, she got it from me. She wasn't quite right, though, not quite. Faith's perfect. He saw Tori jolt. Yeah, you've gotten pretty tight with Faith, haven't you? I plan to be pretty tight with her myself. I was going to wait till August for her, got my little ritual, you know, but I'll have to move things up. Oh, she'll be late, by the way. I talked Lissy into going over to see her, and I know my girl. She'll keep Faith occupied just long enough. They'll know this time, Dwight. You won't be able to pass it off on someone else. Your father sure did cooperate, didn't he? Did I mention I was the one who killed your mother? Gave her a call, told her I was a friend, and her loving husband was on his way to get her. Just seemed like a nice touch, one that kept the cops on his ass and let me sit back and watch with my concerned mayor attitude. She was nothing to you. None of them was, except Hope. And don't you worry about me. Nobody'll look to me. I'm an upstanding citizen, and right now I'm out at the mall buying a teddy bear for my unborn child. A big yellow bear. Lissy's just going to love it. I could never really feel you, she murmured, because there's nothing there to feel. You're almost blank inside. I wondered about that. Gave me some bad moments. I took your hand today, a kind of test, just to see. You got nothing from me, but you're going to feel me before we're done. Why don't you run the way she did? You know how she ran and called out. I'll give you a chance. No, I'll give myself one. Without an instant's hesitation, she stabbed out with the stick, aiming for his eye. When he screamed, she ran, as Hope had done. The moss tangled in her hair, slithering spider legs, and the ground sucked greedily at her feet. Her shoes slithered, tearing through soaked ferns as she batted viciously at branches. She saw, as Hope had seen, the two images blending into one, hot summer night merging with steamy afternoon, and felt, as Hope had felt, with her own fear and rage leaping just ahead of the childhood terror. She heard, as Hope had heard, the footsteps pounding behind her, the thrashing through the brush. It was the rage that stopped her, that made her turn before the intent was clear in her mind. It seared through her, black as pitch, as she charged him with teeth and claws. Stunned by the sudden attack, half blind from the blood, he went down beneath her, howling as she sank her teeth into his shoulder. He struck out, felt the blow connect, but she clung like a burr, raking her nails down his face. None of the others had been able to fight him, but she would. God, she would. I am Tori. The words were a battle cry ringing in her ears. She was Tori, and she would fight. Even when his hands closed around her throat, she tore at him. When her vision grayed, when she was gasping for air, she used her fists. Someone was shouting her name, wild, desperate calls that echoed inside the roar of blood in her head. She clawed at the hands around her throat, choking when the grip loosened. I feel you now, fear and pain. Now you know, you bastard. She was being lifted away, and she fought mindlessly, her gaze locked on Dwight's face. Blood ran from his eye, and his cheeks were ripped from her hands. Now you know, now you know. Tori, stop, look at me. His face white and running with sweat, Cade held hers until her eyes cleared. He killed her. It was always him. I never saw it. He's hated you his whole life. He's hated all of you. You're hurt. No, I'm not. It's his blood. Cade, my God, she went crazy. Coughing, Dwight rolled to his side, struggled up to hands and knees. It felt as if he were bleeding from 1,000 wounds. His right eye was a burning coal, but his mind worked and worked fast and cool. She thought I was her father. Liar! Rage bloomed again and had her struggling wildly against Cade. He killed Hope. He was waiting here for me. Killed Hope? Blood dripped from his torn mouth as Dwight sank back on his knees. That was almost 20 years ago. She's sick, Cade. Anybody could see she's sick. Jesus, my eye. You have to help me. He tried to get to his feet and was genuinely shocked when his legs wouldn't hold him. "For God's sake, Kate, call an ambulance. I'm going to lose my fucking eye." "You knew they came here." Cade kept Tori's arms pinned as he studied the ravaged face of his old friend. "You knew they snuck out at night to come in here. I told you myself. We laughed about it. What does that have to do with anything?" Dwight's good eye wheeled as he heard the slash of wet branches. Carl D., panting with the effort, pushed through the brush. "Thank Christ. Chief, call an ambulance. Tori had some kind of breakdown. Look what she did to me." "Sweet Jesus Christ," Carl D. muttered as he hurried forward to Dwight's side. "He wanted me to run, but I've stopped running." Tori stopped struggling and lay a hand over Cade's as Carl D. crouched to tie his handkerchief over Dwight's ruined eye. "He killed Hope and the others. He killed my mother. I tell you, she's crazy," Dwight shouted. He couldn't see. God damn it, he couldn't see. His teeth began to chatter. "She can't face what her father did. We'll get you to the hospital, Dwight, then we'll sort this all out." Carl D. looked over at Tori. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm not hurt." "You don't want to believe me. You don't want to believe what he has been living side by side with you all these years. But it has. It found a way." She shifted, met Cade's eyes. "I'm sorry. I don't want to believe you either, but I do. I know it." And drawing on that, she got to her feet. "The gun he killed my mother with is in the attic of his house, up in the rafters on the south side." Gently she rubbed a hand over her throat where the violence of his fingers left their mark. "You made a mistake, Dwight, letting me in that far, getting that close. Should have been more careful with your thoughts." "She's lying. She planted it there herself. She's crazy." He stumbled as Carl D. pulled him to his feet. "Cade, we've been friends all our lives. You have to believe me." "There's something you have to believe," Cade told him. "If I'd gotten here sooner, you'd be dead now. You believe that, and you remember it." "You gotta come on with me now, Dwight." Carl D. snapped cuffs over his wrists. "What are you doing? What the hell are you doing? You're taking the word of a crazy woman over mine?" "That gun isn't where she said, or it doesn't match what was used to kill a young police officer and a helpless woman. I'll give you a big apology. Come on with me. Miss Tori, you best go on to the hospital yourself." "No." She wiped the blood off her mouth with the back of her hand. "I haven't done what I came to do." "You go ahead," Carl D. told him. "I'll take care of this. Miss Tori, I'll be by to see you later." "She's crazy!" Dwight kept screaming it as Carl D. pulled him away. "He's insulted." With a shaky laugh, Tori pressed her fingers to her eyes. "That's the primary emotion running through him right now. Insult that he would be treated like a criminal. It's even bigger than the hate and the hunger." "Step back from him," Cade demanded. "Don't look at him." "You're right, Cade. You're right. Second time I almost lost you. I'll be damned if it'll ever happen again." "You believed me," Tori murmured. "I could feel how it hurt you, but you believed me. I can't tell you what that means." She put her arms around him and held tight. "You loved him. I'm so sorry." "I didn't even know him." And still Cade grieved. "If I could go back, we can't. I've spent a lot of time learning that." "Your face is bruised." He turned his lips to it. "His is worse." She leaned her head against his shoulder as they began to walk. "I was running, and I was going to keep on running. Then, all at once, there was this life inside me, this rage of life. He wasn't going to win. He wasn't going to chase me like a fox after a rabbit. For once, he was going to know what it was like. He was going to know." He would never get the picture completely out of his head, Cade knew, of Tori, her face bruised and bloody, tearing like a cat at Dwight, and his hands around her throat. "He'll keep denying," Cade said. "He'll hire lawyers, but it won't matter. In the end, it won't matter what he does." "No, I think you can depend on Agent Williams to tie it all up." "Poor Lissy," she sighed. "What will she do?" Tori stopped in the clearing to gather the fallen flowers. The fire had burned down to sputters, and the light, watery streams of it slanted through the trees. "I'll come back and do this another time with Faith. This time is for you and me." Together they walked to the banks of the river. We loved her, and we'll always remember her. Tori tossed flowers on the water. But it's over now. Finally. I've waited so long to say goodbye. She had tears in her yet, but they were quiet and they were healing. They glimmered on her cheeks as she turned to Cade. I'd like to marry you in the garden tomorrow and wear my grandmother's dress. He took her hand and kissed it. Would you? Yes, I would. Yes, I very much would. And I'd like to go to Paris with you and sit at a table in the sunlight and drink wine, make love with you when the sun's coming up. Then I want to come back here and build a life with you. We're already building one. He drew her close. The sun shimmered in thin beams and moss dripped with rain. Flowers, bright blossoms, floated silently down the river.
God help us, but I'm hungry enough myself, I'll risk it. Branagh walked back with them, glancing back once. Right up the arse, she thought.